A very warm welcome to all the members present virtually for today's virtual CPE meeting on Reimagine Internal Race for Relevance Day 2. Yesterday we have covered three technical sessions: assurance mapping, new age auditors, the future of internal audits and systems control, role of internal audit by most eminent faculties. So let us continue today's technical sessions. So technical session 4 is on internal audit, meeting stakeholders expectation. For this, we have CA Sivaram Subramaniam sir. Welcome, sir. On behalf of Bangalore branch and the Internal Audit Standards Board, I welcome once again Sivaram Subramaniam sir for today's session. To give a brief introduction about Sivaram sir, he is currently working as a chief executive at Titan Company Limited, a Tata flagship company. He has 28 plus years of internal audit experience in both consulting and industry. He has worked across the wide spectrum of corporates covering MNCs, American, European, Asian, Indian conglomerates, listed companies, as well as promoter-driven organizations. His industry domain experience ranges from infrastructure, manufacturing, aviation, telecom to consumer durables, FMCG, retail hospitality, and so on. His work domain encompasses several aspects such as audit, compliance, SOX, ERP, ERM, COSO 2013, Ethics Committee, Whistleblower Program. In his various roles, he has led several corporate governance agendas and has been an integral part of several cross-functional teams on various large-scale transformation and strategic projects. His team was awarded for best use of technology for automated analytics and continuous auditing. With this brief introduction, I once again welcome Sivaram Subramaniam sir for today's session. And also we have Deepika madam also, next session speaker. Welcome ma'am. And over to Sivaram sir for today's deliberation.
Thank you so much, Panindra. I hope I'm audible, and a very, very good evening to all the participants. Extremely privileged and honored to be accorded this opportunity to speak in front of you, all of you. And, yesterday's sessions were probably more technical, future, and as Panindra put on the technical session. Today we are talking more about managing stakeholder perceptions, managing stakeholder expectations, which is a little bit soft skill, and it requires a lot of, maybe a little bit of strategy and how we deal with people. So yesterday, the first session was all on assurance map and the way we go about making those, assurance and giving assurance to key people. And then obviously Rajiv talking about metaverse. Fortunately or unfortunately, I am kind of bringing you back to, dealing with real people and how do we manage their expectations. So I'm going to present my screen. Just give me a second. I hope
Yeah, you can do it full screen, sir.
I'm just trying to do that. 1 second. 1 second. Yeah, is this visible? Okay, so we're talking about reimagining internal audit, race to relevance, and obviously, you are relevant when you meet the stakeholders' expectation. Even whatever you do, end of the day, if it doesn't meet the stakeholders' expectation, how do you become relevant? And therefore, I'm going to make a little bit of a tiny effort in sharing my experiences and the learnings that I have. So before I start, the standard disclaimer: these are purely personal views, not to be construed as any organization's view, either past or present of mine. The topic today is about internal audit and managing stakeholders' expectations as an internal auditor. Now, I'm going to, normally, if it had been an interactive session, we would have probably had a little bit of Q&A kind of a thing. But here, I'm going to just show some pictures and names. I'm sure all of you would figure this is a Bangalore branch session. So I'm sure everyone would probably be able to correlate it. This is Mr. Narayan Murthy. And this gentleman, I'm sure most of you guys would have guessed, is Mr. Vishal Sikka. And this gentleman is Mr. Nandan Nilekani. Now, why am I talking about these three people? I'll just give a context to it, is that both Mr. Nandan Nilekani and Mr. Vishal Sikka were the CEOs or the managing directors of Infosys, and during the time, Mr. Nandan was actually the chairman of the company. Not a hidden fact, but probably Mr. Nandan Nilekani had a much better and flourishing run at office when Mr. Narayan Murthy was at the helm as a chairman. But probably Mr. Vishal Sikka, not saying anything about him here, maybe did not have that kind of a home run as Mr. Nandan Nilekani had. What does this talk about? Obviously the same chairman, but two people. One could meet the expectations, one perhaps could not meet the expectation. Now, the story doesn't stop here. If I put up the next and the last picture in this frame, I'm kind of quite confident that a lot of us may not be able to identify him. I also could not a couple of weeks earlier when I was doing this research. This guy is Mr. Hasso Plattner. Now, who is Mr. Hasso Plattner and what does the relevance he has? Mr. Hasso Plattner is to SAP what Mr. Narayan Murthy is to Infosys. So, the correlation here is that Mr. Vishal Sikka was the managing director or head of SAP under the chairmanship of Mr. Hasso Plattner, and he was having an extremely successful and an extremely flourishing run as a managing director. So what do we have here? We have two set of people under the same set of chairman, under the same chairman, having different run and probably able to have a different expectation achievement. And you have the same guy who was worked under two different people and had a different set of expectation matching. So what does this say? This basically says that today, if you are looking for a mantra or a magic wand which would make us transform into people who can manage stakeholder expectations very well, that's not the case, because it will change. It will depend upon a lot of factors, and therefore there is no one size fits all solution. You see the same suit being worn by so many different people. Obviously, it's completely ill-fitting on most of them. So you typically don't have, I can't today give you a tailor-made solution to manage the various kind of stakeholders or the stakeholders in all scenarios, so on and so forth. But I'm going to just share some of my experiences and how and what I have learned trying to meet the stakeholder expectation. Now, we're talking about the stakeholders itself being different or the scenarios being different, and therefore the same solution will not work. How does it impact as an internal auditor, as a stakeholder? Is that the stakeholder, the organization's size and spread, that itself will define as to what would be the expectations. You're a big organization, your expectations would be different. As a smaller organization, 400, 500 crore, the expectations from internal audit will be much different than, let's say, an organization which is 20,000 crores or an organization which is having a turnover of 1 lakh crore. Okay, similarly, the spread. Now you have a fairly centralized B2B business kind of a organization, few select manufacturing locations and few select customers. It's a contract based or it's a project based company. The spread is less. You'll have different expectations from internal audit as compared to, let's say, a company like Titan, which will have some thousands of stores all over the country, and therefore the expectations from internal audit will be different. The age of the organization also matters a lot. At what stage I am? Am I kind of a startup? Is the promoter just starting up a venture, big scale, small scale, or it's like a new age startup, or it's a much matured organization who's seen already last couple of decades of operations? So that's another factor which impacts the expectation. We've got nature of control. When I say nature of control means, is it let's say it's a multinational company operating out of a US or a Europe, and you have a professional set of people here, or it's a JV with an Indian partner, or it's a completely promoter-driven company, or it's a promoter-driven company, but professional, the controls are given to or the management is given to a set of professionals, so on and so forth. All this will again change the expectations from internal audit. And lastly, the stakeholder themselves. Now, we as stakeholders, we as internal auditors have stakeholder at all levels, inside and outside the organization. A process owner, to a function head, to a business CEO, to the board of, or to the audit committee, to the board, to the regulator. Each one of them is a stakeholder, and each one of them will have a different set of expectations from each one of us. And in a large number of cases, it's fairly divergent. So, what a process owner wants from internal audit and what an audit committee wants from an internal audit will be very different, or could be in fact divergent. And therefore, to manage both of them is not a mean task and needs to be done. And that's primarily what the stakeholder management actually works on. Now, how does a company or stakeholders view internal audits? What are the various types? There are a lot of organizations we believe that internal auditor is a conscience keeper. You keep coming, you keep checking what we do, tell us where we are going wrong, and therefore we are always at the the businesses is always having this in mind that isn't an audit would come, he would ask these questions, and therefore in all my integrity I should be fairly clean and come across as one who's following all the rules by the book. He could also be the CEO's trusted advisor, whereby he's expecting internal audit to go deep dive, look into business, come up with solutions, come up with areas of opportunities. It could be in the areas of control. It could be in the areas of business efficiency. It may not as much be strategic. And there are cases where you actually end up being a promoter's sharpshooter. He's expecting you to be actually going ahead and telling what all are the problems. How do you go and set them right? So these are various roles and expectations that are expected out of an internal audit, obviously at different points of time in different organizations. So what do they want typically? What do the process owners want? An expectation from process owner is that you take less time in audit. Please reduce the audit intensity. Don't keep coming back to me every year, every month, every quarter, and try and do everything that you can do in a much later time. And can you resolve all these issues at my level? Okay, these are problems. I'll rectify it. Can you look at those rectifications and move ahead? So that's what each process owner wants. Can I close out? It's not that he's wanting to hide anything, but can I close? Can I assure you? Can I give you the satisfaction that I am rectifying all this, and can this be closed at my level? The business heads look at it. Hey, do what you're doing, but don't hamper business priorities. Don't be an impediment. I have business to do. There are customers to manage. Don't take too much of time and don't put too many hurdles or bottlenecks. And you would basically ask, tell me, what do I have to do to make sure that whatever internal audit is raising, how do I address it? What would a CEO or a board want? He'd ask us, what's the real state of controls? Am I governed? That would be his typical question. And as a promoter, they would be, as I said, talking about areas of opportunities, efficiencies, and his questions would typically be, okay, you've gone here. This is my subsidiary company. You've seen this. How do you think it is working? Do I invest more? Do I divest from here? Do I focus more? Do I defocus? Do I just keep a management representation there? Or do I get involved in board? Whom to target? Obviously he is not governed only by internal audit reports, but he is expecting some kind of an insight onto this. So if you look at the last slide and the current slide, varying expectations across each levels, various type of expectations, various types of output expected. So the most important thing is understanding the expectation very clearly. Now let me just show you a picture. Now this is a lady talking to her husband, and very angry, very apparently, that she expected her husband to be home before 7, and the husband is saying, listen, I am home before 7. Now this is, people know this is Hagar. Hagar was a Scandinavian guy. In those countries, night, the sun sets maybe by 11ish or 10ish and is up by 4 o'clock in the morning. So obviously, if you look at the dark background behind, obviously it's not 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. in any case here. And he's saying, I'm home before 7, because he says, listen, I had only 6 beers and I came home. So, understanding of the expectation itself is either not there or it is a convenient expectation. You said 6, I will choose to understand it in the way I believe. And therefore, it is very important that unless and until we understand the clear expectations from people, we will never be able to manage it. So important from the other side to be as clear in their communication, important from internal auditor's side to reiterate and reconfirm what exactly is the expectation. Now, manage stakeholder. Most importantly, to manage stakeholder, you need to manage perception. That's the critical thing. Manage a stakeholder, because what does a stakeholder end of the day do? The stakeholder end of the day forms an opinion, forms a perception. And if his perception about us as internal auditor is not right, overall, we will not be effective, will not be able to flourish in our career, will not be able to flourish in our profession. And we will constantly be under this bickering of, we are not value adding, we are not giving what they want, so on and so forth. So most important thing when we look at managing a stakeholder is managing the perception. Now, when you look at this chart, there are two aspects to it. If you look at the bottom line, there are people who impact perception, okay, which basically means that he is an opinion maker. There is a person who believes I am good. He goes around and talks about it in the organization. By default, my perception improves. So there are people who will have less impact on our perceptions, on perception about us as internal auditors, and there are people who will have a high impact on our perception about us. And then there are those who are impacted by this perception. Again, there are people who, even if they are impacted by the perception, it doesn't matter because they're not in the decision-making role. And then there are obviously people who have this high visibility or high impact on the perception that we are creating. Now, what do I mean by this is, let's understand it this way. Let's say it's a small process owner. There's a purchase manager sitting in one of the locations, and he's by nature, has a very limited circle within the organization, limited view or whatever it is. So even if he has a false perception or whatever perception he builds about us, he's not going to be circulating or percolating within the organization. And obviously, he has no role to play either in our appointment, our scope, our mandate, our fees, our salaries, our structure, so on and so forth, our reappointment, so on and so forth. So that is a person who's in this lower quadrant. And obviously, you have people who are high perception. So these are people who are well connected within the organization, have a speech. These could be old timers having a close connect with the senior people, and people listen to them. They know the business. They are perceived to be smart enough, but they still may have a very limited impact on the appointment per se. But they can create an impact. They can create that aura of whether we are good or bad. And these are the people. And I'll come to exactly on how we need to manage these people. And then people who are high on decision points, but maybe less on creating an impact. This could be the various business heads or people in the independent board. They take the decision, but they are not the ones. They hear our perceptions. They don't create our perceptions. So those are people at this bucket. And obviously, then you have people like the key business heads and who take the final decision, who have both the decision making as well as impacting the perception. And this could also be your audit committee's person. So when you look at people with a low quadrant, you just need to keep them monitored. Don't take too much effort. Don't go overboard to support them. Keep monitoring them. If you see any sense, try and go and manage it. But otherwise, just keep monitoring them. It is this bucket where you need a more informal engagement. Keep speaking to these people. Offer them extra support. Go out of the way so that the perception that they create is good. And then these are people with whom we need to keep a regular interface. It needs to be more clinical. You keep engaging with them, keep understanding what their specific requirements are. And finally, these are the bucket where you need to do an extremely proactive interface. So obviously, it's not easy to just keep going and speaking to the board. But whenever you get an opportunity, whenever you get, it could be a promoter, it could be the CFO in smaller organizations who impact, keep engaging with them very proactively. Keep seeking their inputs and align their expectations, what they want, with these guys. So if they want X and these guys want Y, it is very, very important that you align this X with this Y. So that is how, very important that when we are looking at a stakeholder management or stakeholder, very important to see each person whom you're interacting with as your internal audit client or a process owner or an auditee. Please try and put them in this bucket and then see what you need to do with them. There is no point in investing much of time and effort here, but keep monitoring it. Don't lose sight of these people. So now what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to pick up the three core stakeholders, the audit committee, the senior management, and the process owners, and talk about few things about how we need to manage their perception. Now, as far as audit committee is concerned, or board is concerned, or the promoters are concerned, you've been hearing about this, see the big picture, see the big picture. And, a lot of time you would wonder, I have given such a brilliant output, but still they don't seem to be happy. They seem to be saying this is too small an issue, or, what is the materiality here? Whereas you find it to be fairly material enough. Now, why does this gap come? Now, just try and understand, assuming this whole square is your audit universe, you have some 50 audit or 100 audit processes to be done. You do, let's say, everything once in 2 years. So therefore, for a year, this will be your audit plan. 50% of your audit universe will be the audit plan. Obviously, you split it over the quarters. So 25% comes across, of the 50% comes across as your audit plan. Now, let's say, everything will not be a problem, but in this entire 25% of the audits that you do, let's say 25 audits that you do, if you are able to find issues in, high risk, big issues impacting even 20% of that, okay, 1/5 of your areas you find a problem, okay, and which are the audit issues. Now imagine, as far as you've gone, you found problem in 1 in 5, which is a high, big audit committee issue for you. That's a big achievement. Let's be fair and honest to ourselves. It is a big achievement. But unfortunately, what happens is when the board looks at it, this is the ratio he looks at. He is looking at the whole company, and then he says, okay, you're talking about one particular process. And that is where, we are unable to meet this expectation gap. It is not that we've not done a great job. We have done a great job. 20% issues coming out of the plan for the quarter, absolutely. But the fact is that when you present during a quarter to your board, to the senior management, this is how it looks like that for them. And even if you consolidate the whole year, this is how it looks. It's probably 10%. And that is where, as I'm saying, the expectation mismatch happens. So what do we do? How do we do it? So it's very important that as internal auditors, when we are saying see the big picture, it's the other way around. Show the big picture. Talk about dashboards and scores. Talk about trends. Give a reference to context. Put some core themes and status. Let me give you an example here. Sorry. There was a quarter when we had done a lot of audits. We had done some stores incentive. We had done some insurance audit. We had done some, our eyewear stores have optometrists, and these are the people hired and from outside and stuff like that. Or we had our franchisee stores where we would deploy our optometrists and stuff. There were various audits we had done, and there were pockets of issues everywhere. But when we looked at all of them, we were able to build a theme around the employee database not being relevant, multiple databases being there, each database not speaking to each other, because of which we found problem in employee insurance, where people who had resigned, they were continued to be covered under a particular insurance process. Optometrists who were being paid X, but we were reimbursing Y, because X was paid by the franchisee and we were paying him X plus. Or for that matter, sales incentive, we were looking at people who were not working in that stores being given incentive, and a whole lot of things. That's because, a database not being accurate, therefore the subsequent processes not being linked to the database they were using. And therefore, so when we talked about this as a theme, it made much larger sense than talking about it in pockets. And all these audits did not happen in one quarter. So when we presented in a quarter, we might have spoken about 1 or 2 issues. But by the time we looked at the third quarter, all these issues put together, some of them even minor ones, we build it up as a theme. So it's not necessary that whenever you are presenting, you need not consider the past. If there are medium or low risk issues also, which can be stitched up to the core themes. So every time that we get an opportunity to speak to the senior management, a promoter, or an audit committee, let us look at it. What can be a theme even from past? And how do we stitch it up and present so that we can give a big picture? That's as far as, one of the biggest things that we need to manage the audit committee. Now, the next is senior management. Now, these are business heads, HR, finance, business heads, procurement heads, supply chain heads. Now, these guys are more keen to, they're keen to hear about exceptions, control gaps, deviation, but they're more business focused. They would probably be very happy to hear something around business. But let me give you a very classic example here. Okay, and you guys need to focus, and we all need to focus on root causes and solutions here. Let me give you a very classic example. Now, this was a FMCG company which was manufacturing salted products, namkeens and all. And we were doing a warehouse cum sales audit. We noticed that there were a fair amount of sales returns happening. And very typical of audit, we picked up what are the reasons for sales return, how is it impacting, and then we saw because the products were going, and we noticed that the primary reason was that wrong products were going, therefore they were being returned, and so what right product which needed to go to the market, you lost the sales potential of that. Plus there were these reverse logistics cost, and obviously these are edible products, so there is a reduction of balanced shelf life. So therefore saleability of that product becomes a challenge, and all these things were there. And typically we went about and said there are too many sales return, you should monitor and you should look at a policy, so on and so forth as an internal auditor. But we went a step ahead because we evaluated what could have happened. And these are very typical, sales returns also happen when you are doing a lot of dumping. But we saw that this company was on a cash and carry model. So the distributors were paying money. So it was not that the sales guys were dumping this product to this distributors and, earning their sales incentives and meeting their targets. It seemed to be some genuine problem. And that's when we went ahead, did a lot of database, data analytics and all. And cutting a long story short, we did data analytics on distributor wise, zone wise, region wise, distance wise, the type of vehicle which services it, transporter wise, everything. And the only common pattern that we could identify was that this ratio of sales return was much higher whenever the truck was being loaded between 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. in the evening. And then when we looked at it, and then we saw that, and then there were a lot of because this was a warehouse audit, there were a lot of other hygiene and housekeeping issues in the warehouse. And what had happened was the company had changed its the cartons in which these products are packed and sold. Initially, each flavor had a different carton. Now, to optimize the cost, they had made one carton which had all the 4 flavors printed on it, and the plant would have put a tick on which flavor this particular carton contains. And one of the mandate of these warehouses in the CFA was to have 100% CFL lighting, whereas we saw that conversion was only around 20% or 25%. And what was happening was, in the yellow light, the guy who was picking up could not really identify the right tick. So while he believed he's picking an X flavor, he was actually picking a Y flavor. And how did we understand? Between 5 to 7 is when when it's a little bit dark, and therefore the tick is not clearly visible. Now, once we went and told them about this particular thing, the senior management was extremely happy. And while, they were all fair from a control perspective, talking about sales return, having a policy around it, having a maker checker, X, Y, Z. But when you talk about these as root cause and solution as to why is it happening and how do you bring in a business efficiency perspective, is when the whole situation changed. And then there was a much larger acceptance and the fact that we are meeting their expectation, because that is what the expectation was. He's saying, you guys are our eyes and ears, you are going to the field, tell us where something is going wrong. Obviously the sales return was baffling them, troubling them also, and this root cause and solution actually made a sea change into the way they were looking at internal audit, or the fact that they got the sense that we were delivering. I'll take one more case as an example. If you see, this is a ship, and if you see this hatch, this is how coal is transported, and this is a crane kind of a thing which just goes in and picks it up. If you are able to see my hand, goes in and picks it up the coal and puts it into trucks or excavators on the port, on the jetty. And what happens is, this is a very big thing. So this crane goes in like up, down, and then move it. It actually can't reach the hatch here or here. So what happens is, there are small excavators sent inside the hatch, and they keep pushing the coal in the middle, and this guy keeps picking up. Now the management was very, very cost savvy and commercially very smart. What they had done was they calculated how much time does it take for an excavator to run and put it inside, put to the middle of this hatch, and then they did, okay, if I get some 3,000 tons, then how much time will the excavator take, and therefore what is a cost per ton? And they said, listen, we will pay for the excavator on a per ton basis. We extract 3,000 tons, we'll give you X. We extract 4,000 tons, we'll give you a 1.33X, that kind of a thing. They were extremely happy so that, it's not a fixed cost and there is a complete variable model. But they were still finding that, the balance sheet was not really working out well, or there was a cost differential when we were putting our own excavators and the vendors' excavators inside it. And again, this was not typically an audit mandate, but once we understood what their typical challenges are on a general business conversation, not really on a control perspective or whatever it is, or we understood the business changes and dynamics changes. What was happening was that earlier they were emptying the whole hatch. Subsequently, the business model changed and they were now accepting part loads also, which basically meant that half of this hatch would be for me and the balance half would probably be going to the next port, which could be a few nautical miles or a few hundred nautical miles away. So what was happening was, when I take the first half, I don't need the excavators at all because I'm able to pick everything from the middle. So the excavators were not being put to use, but because I was paying on a per ton basis, even if I was from this 3,000 tons, if I was picking up 1,000 tons, I was paying him for the 1,000. Whereas for the first 1,000 tons, I don't need to put in the excavator at all. Again, this was when we talked about this solution, that is when they caught upon the fact that saying, okay, we need to pay a per ton only when the unloading is happening above a particular number. And that was again something when we talked about the root cause and the solution, it was highly appreciated or rather accepted. And same logic, then the entire expectation from the CEOs or the plant, or in this case, the location head, was that, you guys come here, you guys look at it differently, tell me where it is. So, the contract was formed, there was a tender committee which was there, the entire working and all were fine. There were evidences that, they actually had a trip sheet meter to figure out how many hours this was running. They had the diesel cost being factored on a monthly basis. Everything was there. When you looked at the, the contracting and rates and vendors, everything was fine and it was genuinely fine. But still, this was this one additional aspect that was given. So it was not a control issue. It was not an audit committee issue, but it was something which the business, and therefore they, you are more welcome. They are more transparent and they are more receptive, even if there are issues with respect to audit committee. So, this is obviously not an example that the picture is talking about, but I keep giving this example. This is called the nail cutter test. Again, in an interactive session, I would have probably asked this question, but I'm sure everyone would have somewhere heard in your life that, you should not cut nails on a Thursday evening. Thursday night, you should not cut nails. And, you pick up a nail cutter and you're trying to do it on a Thursday evening. Someone will say, no, don't cut, because that's what grandmom said, that's what my mom said and everything. And when you ask why, no, that's what we've been told. That's what we've been told. And on a very lighter note, it is probably being said that, Thursday evening, if you cut the nails on Friday, if you are partying, you'll be not able to open the chips packet or a beer can. But that's on a lighter note. But the fact is that the same way as auditors, we have been taught few things. A PO preparer and an approver should be different. GRIR, long pending good GRIR is a concern. And we go ahead and tell our clients the same thing. But we do not answer the why. When he says, Acha, kya problem hai? What is the problem? We say, no, GRIR should not be more than 15 days. But what is the problem if it is more than 15 days? We don't answer the fact that, is it because we have paid in advance, the guy has not given, I'll not be able to process the invoice, I might lose the GST credit, XYZ. No one is answering that, and instead just talking about the fact that, listen, GRIR should not be more than. So it's very important that when you are looking at things, look at it from a business angle. Don't get into strategic issues. Do not start questioning, why do you need a CFA? Why don't you do it on your own? Why do you need so on and so forth? But focus primarily on what are the business efficiencies, where are the exceptions, and what are the root causes and solutions for that. That is what will give us a much, much higher acceptance from the senior management. When it comes to process owner, I had given this thing in my earlier note also, that engagement is the most important aspect. We need to engage with them extremely, but take minimalistic time of the process owners, give adequate time for resolution. The problem is that we take so much time with them. We ask this, we ask that. It's okay. Sometimes we also have our challenges. The old team is not there, new team is there, but we take so much time. And then, we send them the reports, we send them the issue sheet, expecting them to respond in 5 days, 6 days, rightly so. But then, sometimes we send it on a Friday evening and Monday morning, we say it's 4 days. And so one, we need to take minimalistic time of theirs as an engagement, but we need to engage with them more and give them adequate time for resolutions and response. And lastly, it's what I call as memo, meet enough, meet often. It's the spell error there. It's not after, it's often. So meet them, go for a cup of tea, understand their problems, understand what challenges they are facing, and maybe offer some solutions around that. Engage with them more as human. And I'll give a very classic example here of, I'm sure a lot of people would have traveled by train. I don't know, nowadays traveling itself is stopped to a great extent. Travel by train, and at least people of my age would remember that when we would go by train in the 3-tier sleeper, and even in other coaches, we would normally have a big chain by which we'll tie up all our luggages so that no one flicks it. And I'm just going to talk about the story. So there was this guy who went and he sat in the train, he kept his suitcase, and he opened his small bag to tie this chain, and he suddenly realized he's not carrying the chain. So there's this vendor who walks by, obviously they're all carrying chain and paper soup and everything. So this guy says, "Bhaiya, ek chain de dena. Can you give me a chain?" Now, obviously, this vendor here knows that this guy is in the railway station. He needs the chain. He doesn't have any other option. Therefore, he quotes a price which is like, he says $100. And this guy says, "Boss, 100 seems to be too high, too high. If you want to give me at 30. Okay, standard bargaining, start at 30% rate." So this guy says, "No, I can't sell it at 100. So there is a little bit of haggling happening, and this guy walks off, and you are wondering what to do. You're looking at other vendors, and the same guy keeps doing toing and froing constantly, calling out chain, paper soap, playing cards, and always looking at you with the corner of his eye, seeing how you are reacting. Now, it's almost time for the train to leave. You are slightly worried, and you again, almost the engine horn has sounded, and you call this guy and say, "Okay, how much?" And by this time, your hand is on the wallet, and you're saying, "Okay, bhaiya, can you give it to me in 50 rupees? And this guy says, yeah, sure, okay. Makes a face, but gives you 50 rupees and takes the 50 rupees, gives you the chain, and the train starts. Now you go, you tie your luggage with this chain, and suddenly you find that this chain is broken all over the place, and the train has moved. And it's not just that, you've lost the 50 rupees. You probably ended up giving him a gone 50 rupee note also. So what has happened in this entire thing is, because you did not give enough time from an engagement perspective, in the end, whatever negotiation happened, whatever decision happened, they were actually at a counterproductive position for both of you. Therefore, again, I will reiterate, it's very important that when you are speaking to the process owners, take minimalistic time of the process owners. Give them adequate time for resolution. Keep meeting them enough. Keep meeting them often. So, in a summary, when we talk about audit committee, focus on big pictures. Look at dashboard trends. You have to balance between assurance and value addition. You found these. I talked about 2 instances of the sales return or the coal unloading. You can just briefly mention it in the, because too much of value addition is not what the board is looking at. Board is probably looking at more around assurance. If it is a promoter, he may be looking at value addition. But if it is a predominantly professional driven organization where there is an audit committee, try and do a good balance between value addition and assurance. Whereas when it comes to senior management, focus on root cause, focus on process KPIs and KRAs. If I am looking at a function, procurement function, understand what is the procurement function's KPI. Does the company want minimized inventory, but not impacting production? Therefore, there should be minimal production loss due to unavailability of raw materials. Or is it that I need to reduce my procurement cost by 3% or 4%? Very different KPIs, very different KRAs. If the company believes, listen, for me, cost is not as critical as it is to make sure that my availability is there, you should focus more around ordering rather than focusing around vendor and rate finalization. So here you focus more on value addition and obviously give an adequate focus on assurance. On process owners, be very conscious of their time, take periodic inputs from them, and don't keep your cards to your chest. If I tell him this observation today, he's going to create all documents and come back with different explanations. Don't keep your cards to your chest. If you do it, it will be much of a detriment to you, and he'll also not trust you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about if you're looking at, if you're looking at an audit, internal audit objective. We're talking about, you need to ensure three things: process adherence, process adequacy, and process efficiency. And when you approach your audit with this, you will be able to achieve the objectives or expectations of all your stakeholders. And I'm going to, I spoke that yesterday has all been a more forward looking. I'm going to quote some examples from our history and mythology to explain these things. I'm sure you all guys would be figuring out what is this picture representing. Now, Lakshman Rekha, which is what this picture is presenting, is the most ancient risk mitigation plan. What was the risk? Risk was that Sita could be kidnapped, and Lakshman Rekha was the control to avoid that risk. Yeah. Now, did this work? No. Was the Lakshman Rekha strong? Yes, because Ravan could not come in. But end of the day, was the risk mitigated? No. Now, let us assume we are, as auditors, going to be inspecting the security at this hut. If we had gone before Sita was kidnapped and we had focused primarily on the process adherence, we would have gone back and reported to the management, to the audit committee, to the process owner, saying, hey, I checked up 7 days. In 7 days, no one breached this line. Therefore, this process is fine. That's purely process adherence. If you talk about process adequacy, okay, and you were evaluating it, and you were evaluating it even before Sita was kidnapped, what would you say? Listen, while this control force stops people from coming from outside to inside, Ravan could not come inside, but it is not stopping Sita from going outside. Therefore, the risk exists, and the current process or the control is not adequate to address your basic risk that Sita could be kidnapped. Now, obviously, you will face a lot of resistance here when first thing they'll say, should we not trust Sita? Aren't they our employees? If Sita doesn't step outside the house, how is she going to go and collect fruits and berries and cook dinner for people? That's her business responsibility. So how does it, what you are saying is completely nonsensical. But the fact is, yes, there is a process inadequacy. Therefore, you should immediately move to the third stage of process efficiency, which basically means that fair point, Sita needs to move, but Sita should not move outside the line. So should I draw the line as close to the footstep or probably around the peripheries so that Sita can move within the periphery, discharge her responsibilities. At the same time, there is a control that she is not moving out and people are not coming in. So, in hindsight, today we can think about it and explain, but whenever you are doing your audit, if you answer these three questions, is the process being adhered to? Important, very simple to answer it in a yes or no. Is the process adequate? You need to really look at a lot of scenarios of ifs and buts, what happens this way, a lot of iteration to come to a conclusion whether the process is adequate. And then if this is not adequate, whatever adequacy you need to do, is it equally efficient for the business to do its work? So once you are able to present all the three cases, I think you've done your job. The stakeholders are going to be extremely happy. Then it is their risk appetite to say, listen, while I can make this line outside the circle, but it requires a lot of effort. It is cost, it is resources that we don't have. We can't prioritize. Therefore, we are taking this risk of depending upon Sita. Otherwise, what will happen is that if we don't speak about it, tomorrow when unfortunately Sita is kidnapped, the first question will come is, okay, what were the auditors doing? You went there 5 days, you did not raise these issues. So therefore, adherence, objective, adequacy. AOE. That's how you need to address. Once you do that, once you present it, there is a much more acceptance in terms of the stakeholders saying that, yes, this is what I'm expecting and this is what I'm getting. Now, typically, what are the audit challenges that we have? Okay. Now look at it. People keep saying auditors are doctors. So I would like to just say, because audit at the first stage, we are doctors, we are specialists, no doubt about it. But at the first stage, we are more like a pathology lab. In a pathology lab, the guy comes, takes your sample and checks your blood sugar, cholesterol and everything and comes with a report. As an auditor, you also go pick up the data points, identify exceptions and provide the first level exception to the people. Now, what happens if you get your report and there is no adverse reading? Your sugars are perfect, your cholesterol is good, your thyroid is great, your LFT and KFT is all working fine. You heave a big sigh of relief. Oh, I am great. But what happens when an auditor puts in a report which says, I don't have many observations? Everyone shouts, have you done the work properly? Your bosses shout, your managers shout, your partner shouts, the client shouts, Arey yaar, tumne kuch dekha hi nahi, you've not seen this thing. I am seeing so many problems. Every day there is a customer complaint and you have not seen. No one ever wonders, the person who has taken my blood sample and tested, I know I have eaten so many chocolates yesterday, but my sugar is normal. Surely this guy is a problem. No, we will all be grateful to our metabolism to say, yeah, I must have had a great metabolism, therefore my sugar is normal. No one ever says that, maybe the guy's testing is wrong. But in audit, you raise an issue, process owners are unhappy. You don't raise an issue, unfortunately, people look at you with a skepticism, have you really done your job? So that's the biggest challenge today internal audit has. There is no way that we can avoid this thing. That's again a perception. People live with it. As internal auditors, accept that it's an occupational hazard. We need to accept it and move ahead. So here are some tips which I'm going to talk about, which overall helps us in, and these are the last few slides of mine before I wrap up. Some of the tips which I'm going to share, again, taking a few from the mythology per se. Now, this is a story where, there is this village which has not had rains for a very long years, some 5-6 years. There has been no rains, nothing. And, people are really worried. And then some elder person in this village said, let's do this big yagya and please the Lord Varuna and, we'll have rain. So they all chip in all their money and, get a big priest and big pandits and Brahmins and get them to a big celebration in the village. And, after a long time, these guys are going to have feast and everything. So whole village congregates at this place just outside the village where this mandap is put up and everything. And only one small boy walks with an umbrella there. Okay. Now, if all of you would want to, probably if this was the story of your life, I'm sure all of us would want to be the boy. And in a way, life has given us this opportunity as internal auditors, because as internal auditors, we will always face this skepticism, but we need to always demonstrate the faith. The moment you demonstrate the faith, the moment you have an unwavering belief in your observations and you have this tenacity, you will be able to surpass the skepticism. And therefore, the moment the skepticism goes off, the expectations are more easily made amenable. So that's one thing. Remember, as internal auditors, we'll face skepticism, but we need to keep demonstrating the faith. Now, again, I don't know whether this picture says it all, but you had Wali and Sugriv, identical twins. Typically, Ram was supposed to kill Wali. Wali had a boon that anyone who fights him, he takes 50% of his power. So obviously, Wali becomes more powerful, and therefore Ram is supposed to kill him from behind his back. Now, I'm not suggesting we do anything of that sort. All I'm trying to say is, let's believe we can't win every time. Okay, you will have some set of process owners who will constantly be unhappy with you, who will have their own versions of what internal audit should do. Don't try and win everyone. Let it go in some cases, because you'll be losing your effort, losing your patience, wasting a lot of effort. Therefore, please take a call. At one point of time, this guy is probably being unreasonable. Leave it. Don't need to win. You win 80% of the people. That impression, that perception, that expectation matching is much, much more than just fighting too much to meet this 20% also. Okay, if you look at this photograph, you'll see Lord Krishna driving this chariot. Obviously, this is Arjun, and this person is Shikhandi. Now, if you all would know, Shikhandi was a half male, half female, a female from previous birth. And why is Shikhandi traveling in Arjuna's chariot? Is because Bhishma, who's the Kaurava's biggest warrior, most fearsome warrior who cannot be killed, is just creating havoc, and he knows Shikhandi is a female, and therefore he will not fight him and puts his arms down, and therefore Arjun is able to kill. The same way, when you are going into a very, very difficult discussion where you need to convince the stakeholder, okay, at some points of time, you figure out who is your Shikhandi that you can carry with you, because seeing which your counterpart would actually put down his defenses. Now, when I say this kind of a thing, for instance, you're going to talk about a compliance issue and you're going to discuss this with a business head or a factory head, take the legal guy with you. As an auditor, he may keep arguing with you, but if the legal guy is there, he will have much less to fight. He will not fight on a legal compliance issue with a legal guy as much as he would fight with an auditor. Of course, your Shikhandi need not necessarily be a person. It can be as simple as data, facts, carry everything. People normally drop their weapons when you clearly present them with data rather than perceptions. So another important thing, when you're fighting and managing senior people, just make sure you get your Shikhandi. Lastly, another story. This is the last slide. Talking about is Sudama is Krishna's friend, very poor man, going through a lot of tough time, goes and meets Krishna, and he carries that poha with good. And for Krishna, obviously, Krishna is living in such opulent lifestyle that, poha and good seems to be a very, very paltry and meager and very, very simple offering. But Krishna sees it, he likes it, and he just picks up a handful of poha and eats it. And then he picks up the next one. And as he's about to eat it, Rukmini stops him and says, listen, one handful is good enough for this birth and the next birth. Basically wanting to say that this offering is good enough to keep Sudama extremely wealthy and happy and prosperous for 2 births. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that it's very important that you save for future. And I've done this personally also. You've got 5-7 audits done. You've got 3-4 good issues coming out of it. The next 2 audits, if it is postponable to be presented to a set of people on your periodic update, defer it for 1 more month, defer it for 1 more quarter, unless and until it is a very, very critical aspect which needs immediate aspect. It's a fraud issue, it's an integrity issue, or whatever it is. because as internal auditors, you're only as good as your last innings. And therefore, if you've got 5 issues, 6 issues, if you can defer 1 or 2 to the next period, when I say period means not financial year per se, but a quarter or a month when you have your senior management or your process owners meeting. Because what will happen is that if you present 6, there is a lot of expectation created that next time also you'll come with 6. If you present 3 and next time you come with 2, it's a kind of balance. As long as it is possible, that's one more thing that you should do, so that again you are impacting the perception of your stakeholders. I think we are good on time and over for any question and answers, because I need to leave slightly. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So we have few questions.
Sure.
Mr. Avinash is asking, like, many times we get confused about what is the actual root cause of the observation. Please explain how to explain it, how to identify it.
It's a very simple thing. You answer 5, you use this 5 why process. Okay. Sorry, 1 second, please. You know, in this particular case also, which we talked about, okay, we constantly went, okay, why is this happening? Why is sales return happening? No need of sales dumping. The guy is paying money on time. Why is it that it is happening? Why is it a wrong product going? Is there a coding issue? Is there a structure issue? So there is a simple thing called 5 why. Answer the why. If you answer that why, answer why that why is happening. So 5 why is a stated logical approve, or rather, you know what, a known management fact. You do it in maintenance. When a machine is down, they are supposed to do a 5 why to arrive at the actual root cause. So that's a fundamental way. If you keep talking about, honestly speaking, we as internal auditors, and I take equally the responsibility to say that, you know, lack of a process, absence of a monitoring process, it does not help. You will have to hit them hard by saying you've not trained your people. People are not doing adequate diligence. Get into that 5 why. Why is this guy not doing it? Because he's not trained, because there is a shortage of manpower, because your process is such that you're using a wrong database. Unless and until you're able to answer that, I mean, that is how you need to look at a root cause. There's again not a standard formula, but 5 why. If you, every time you find an observation, assume that that is an impact. What is the cause? Ask why it happened, 5 times. If you go back, I'm sure somewhere down the line, you are bound to get that information.
Sure, sir. So Rajiv is telling, like, presentation was excellent with a systematic, easy to understand approach and covering some very good integral aspect of practical audit issues. Thank you for sharing it, sir. So it's a compliment.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir. So I think only this many questions were there. So on behalf of Bangalore branch and entire managing committee of Bangalore branch and internal auditing standards board committee, so I wholeheartedly thank you so much for your valuable time, sir. So you explained the concepts very well and with linking mythology concepts. So thank you so much for your valuable time,
My
sir.
pleasure. I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. So dear members, let's move on to the next technical session. So next technical session is on information technology controls for internal audit. For this, we have CAS Deepika ma'am. Welcome, ma'am. To briefly introduce Deepika ma'am, she is a ACA certified credit research analyst and also completed DISA PGB Business Intelligence Limited Insolvency Examination. She is working at Messrs. C&K and Associates LLP, handling assignments involving audit analytics, exception reporting, application review, ERP remediation, information technology, general controls, internal financial controls for banks, NBFCs, manufacturing companies, and many other work assignments. And she has held as a special invitee to Digital Accounting and Assurance Committee of SRC of ICAI. So she is a joint secretary of Women's Committee of the Institute of Internal Auditors, Madras chapter. And she is a regular faculty with SRC of ICAI for information technology training and advanced information technology training. And she is also a guest lecturer at various educational institutions and colleges in topics of data analytics, blockchain technology, information systems, and IT audits, audit automation. With this brief introduction, I once again welcome Deepika ma'am for today's session, and over to you, ma'am.
Yes, yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the introduction. Sorry, my network suddenly was bad. I will just share screen. Yeah, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to be part of this VCM today. So for today's discussion, we are going to talk about the information technology controls for internal audit. So what is the agenda that we are going to cover in ITC? So this is a broader area where we are going to talk about both application related control, information technology, general controls, as well as the process related, IT process related controls. So we'll be seeing a wide overview and we'll be seeing in details the fundamentals of this audit procedures, which we can inbuilt into our internal audit function. So fundamentals of IT environment is going to be our key target area, which we are going to evaluate. And then we'll be going into the categories of IT controls and then into the key controls, which we need to evaluate as a auditor in IT general controls area and IT application controls. So why, as part of audit, we need to test IT controls. So now I think all of you know that the entire business process is running through technology. So the objective is to ensure that there is confidentiality of information, there is a segregation of duties, people are given access only on need to know basis, there is enough controls to ensure third parties are not having access to this data. And next, we are going to evaluate the integrity of data, where we need to ensure that data is not altered, modified, it is in its original form. The third objective is going to be availability of data, whether in case of any disaster, they will be able to restore data, whether at the time of requirement, there will be data available. What is the possibility of downtime in the data? So all this will be our key objectives, because of which we need to evaluate IT controls as part of our audit engagement. So how are we going to include IT controls into our internal audit? Whether auditing IT controls is a specific special assignment, or is it going to be part of our internal audit? Generally, it is going to be part of our internal audit, where we will be testing IT controls along with audit of each process. Let's say we are going to audit procure to pay or procurement as a function for this quarter of internal audit. We can evaluate all the controls with relation to information technology also along with that particular part. Let's say we are going to cover next quarter HR. We can cover the attendance systems, payroll systems, HRMS systems along with that. So the IT controls will be like as part of the regular internal audit itself, you will be, we can implement IT controls review also. Otherwise, we can take information technology controls as a separate phase of audit and do it separate as a separate function in one quarter. That is also possible. Otherwise, we can use it during our audit analytics. So on a regular internal audit, when we are engaging ourselves, we can do audit analytics and MIS review to ensure that it is like black box testing and white box testing. In white box testing, you go into the system, identify whether system controls are in place, whether you are evaluate what type of control is implemented, what type of automated control is there, how automated posting is happening, what type of backups are there. All that will be actually white box testing. So the first two parts which we are discussing is white box testing. And the second one is audit analytics, wherein we can actually evaluate the data, the output data, the entire output data which has the system has generated, and then we can evaluate if there is lapse in any authorization, lapse in any access, is there any exception in or exceptional pattern in terms of entries, exceptional terms in patterns of the amount of figures, whether it's modified, unmodified, how many times it was edited, how many times it was deleted. Like that, we can take the entire data, logs, and we can do an analytical audit procedure, wherein as a black box testing, without actually testing the IT controls in how, like in the UAT environment, or by doing a system testing, we can do it outside also. So that also we can do. So IT controls can be scoped in different ways through along with our internal audit, but it is a very, very critical and the most important function as an internal auditor, aiding our audit also, and for the management also. So the major category of IT controls which we need to evaluate is IT application controls. So application controls is the primary thing where all your data processing is happening. Data integrity tests are going to be applied here. The second part is going to be your IT general controls. So we'll see in detail what are the components of each and what is the stakeholders' expectations in both the areas. So when we take the overall IT environment of the organization, there is going to be IT infrastructure. So those are going to be your network devices, servers, the physical devices. Let's say you may have routers, switches. All these are going to be your IT infrastructure. Then we need an IT process, like how we are going to have procurement as a function, sales as a function. We'll have IT as a function, where inside the IT team, there is going to be several activities on a day-to-day basis. So maybe the most common activity will be the help desk. But apart from that, there will be server management, log management, backup management, batch job management, change management, incident management. So there's going to be a lot of activities which are required for hosting this infrastructure, hosting this application. So those processes also need to be reviewed, like how we are evaluating for segregation of duty at the time of PO release, invoice booking. Same like that, we have to evaluate the segregation of duties, the logs, the audit trail of IT processes also. So these two are the key important components of IT general controls. That is evaluating different way IT processes implemented in the organization and evaluating the network devices and the other IT infrastructure which is hosted in the organization. So next, coming to the business applications. This is going to be your ITAC. So where we are going to have maybe it's a one single ERP, or it may be components of applications which are constituting a ERP. Apart from the components of applications, there may be third-party portals, vendor portals, websites. Then you may have other applications like barcoding, attendance systems, which may or may not be integrated with the ERP. You may have a route mapping system. It is actually not possible to include all the applications into the ERP or have a robust integrated system. If we go into detail and evaluate each business function of the organization, I'm sure we'll be able to find out applications which are outside the ERP still capturing data. So all that also will be very critical when we are evaluating IT applications during internal audit. So all this evaluation will be coming under the ITAC area, that is information technology application controls. So when we see the IT environment, so we are having the users or the employees or the key customers or stakeholders of the organization who are going to use their end use computing devices like laptops, tabs for accessing some front-end screens, passing entries, writing, putting data, writing comments, sending for approvals. All this is going to be front-end. So all the controls which you are going to audit above this will be actually IT application controls. And below this is going to be your IT infrastructure. How from front end they are going to access server. From the web server, it may come to the application server. After that, it will go to the filing system. You will have database. You will have a database server. So all this will be your ITGC area. These are the general controls over the IT infrastructure and the processes. So from front end, whatever data processing and data evaluation is happening is going to be our application controls, which we are going to see. So this way, we will never get confused over the scoping and auditor's responsibility on what all areas we are going to cover for each area of scope. So now when we go into IT infrastructure, the major components of IT infrastructure will be your IT server management. So you may have multiple servers, multiple physical servers for different applications, or it may be one server and they may have virtualization for virtual machines for installing different applications. We have to study the how they have configured each thing and how they are managing. Now, when we come to our general controls, these devices are the actual backbone which is hosting this system, right? So people who are accessing these systems should have more controls and more delegation of powers, like 2 times or 3 times the controls should be extra than the people who are connecting through our end user systems. So these users are called as privileged users. So whenever we are evaluating IT general controls, it can be infrastructure controls or it can be process controls, but whenever we are evaluating the people and the delegation of powers and segregation of duties, for these people, it is going to be called as privileged user or privileged identity management. So it is called as PIM. Okay, privileged identity management. So there, let's say they have username, password. So the person who is going to access database should have like more than password. Like he should have username, password, and OTP, so that you know only legitimate person is going to log in. So even after having 2-factor authentication, where I'm having OTP plus password, I need to have one more person to validate whatever changes he has done, to ensure that only legitimate purpose, only for legitimate purpose, legitimate requirement, we are logging into the database. So there also login will be required. We cannot say you cannot touch the database after installation, initial installation. There will be maintenance requirement. There could be some change management, some application change could happen. So there may be different requirements because of which we may need to log into the database or log into the server. But the identity management is a key parameter that we need to evaluate. So apart from that, we have to evaluate logs. We have to evaluate the change management of these devices, how these devices are going to be, life cycle of these devices, how these devices are going to be replaced, repaired, maintenance, how these assets are managed. So like we have fixed asset component register for normal fixed assets. For IT also, we need a component register which is separately managed. Life cycle of these assets are more critical and important, because here actually our technology upgradation is much faster than the normal fixed asset life. So here we need to have more control over the life cycle of assets. So these are the various parameters which we'll be evaluating in the IT infrastructure perspective. So then we have the IT processes. So these are the major components of IT general controls. So if you take this operating system, application data, database, so this is all the internal infrastructure which we are talking about, which is there inside the red square. So for maintaining this, so first level of control which we need to have is the physical security. That is, who is having physical access to go into the server room, who can, like how the authorization is going to happen, what type of approval should be there. Then also about like what type of doors we have. Okay, and this servers and the racks in which servers and database are hosted, how that racks are secured. All this will come under the physical security. So is there surveillance? Is there a security guard? Is there a CCTV camera? Is there an access log? Is there a gate pass system separately to manage the server room access? All this will be our physical security controls over the IT processes. Next is going to be our computer operations or day-to-day operations. So this is on a regular basis, how your person logs in, how there will be performance evaluation metrics for each of the system. So how much is our disk capacity, server capacity, who should do what activity on a regular basis. There will be batch jobs that they are managing. There may be interfaces that they are managing, backups they are managing. all that computer operation processes. Next is the access control. So we already discussed about the privileged identity management. So here we need to have more than one factor authentication, where we are having more control over the people as well as the activities that they are doing. So for this PIM, there are a lot of solutions which are actually there to manage the audit trail, where whenever a person is logging into a critical IT infrastructure, the system will take snapshot of the critical event so that the logs are maintained forever. So next is the program change management. So that is whenever there's going to be a change, it can be like upgrade of a hardware, replacement of a hardware, or let's say there's going to be a configuration change in any system, or there's an upgrade that is going to happen. So there may be an operating system patch, that is update, like how we get iOS update, Android update. Even our operating systems update will be there. For application systems will be there. As well as there's a change in a particular version. Patch will be sent from the vendor. So those patches, how we are deploying. Let's say it's our own application. It's a bespoke system developed in-house. So in such cases, we'll be having change requests that are coming from our business teams to the IT teams, where they are going to implement a particular change. So all that will be your IT processes in related to program change. So then if we are having in-house system development lifecycle also will be part of IT operations and IT processes, but it is not necessarily if we are using third-party product or we are using software as a service product, then the development may not be part of our internal IT process, but it will be like third-party product. So we will be seeing in detail how we have to identify what type of audit test to do for what type of application we are implementing. So in the overall IT GC, IT infrastructure and IT processes is the major scope and major controls which we'll be evaluating, which we saw now. So next we are going to see on the IT application based controls, ITAC. So when we talk about ITAC, we have the end users. They are going to be the actual data generators who are going to key in data. So they'll be like 0.0. So they are going to input some data. The application which we built is going to process some data and it is going to give some output for stakeholders' needs. It can be board, shareholders, regulatory requirements. So now at the time of this data input and data processing, we are going to evaluate the controls through these processes. So at the time of data input, what type of validations are required? How you should prepare your data. So for each field, what type of controls I can have. So there are different controls which I can include into my data validation. So like check digits are there, unique numbers are there, then restricting into alphabets, numeric, amount, then limits, let's say material variance limits, key triggers. Then we have this workflows where a particular entry is parked and posted. So 4-layer approval, 5-layer approval, or just a maker checker. So all this will come under my input data validation. So whatever this data I'm going to input, I should have an audit trail. So that is at least a basic log of who entered, what is entered will be captured in all systems. But now we have a regulatory requirement which is going to come into place from 1st April 2022, which is actually requiring a more detailed audit trail capture, or more detailed audit trail to be maintained. So then it is the internal policies and procedures of the company. So depending on the criticality of the data processed. So let's take you are going to do application control testing for a bank or an insurance company. Those are all like highly regulated industry. Let's talk about stock exchange. So these are all actually highly regulated, public money is involved here. Actually, the controls over this data input and data processing is going to be very, very, very robust. And the policies and procedures will also be very robust. Like the policies to be implemented in the workflows will be very robust. But let's take next layer of companies. You are going to report only to the customers. Okay, your stakeholders are going to be customers. So, or you are not dealing with public money or not a regulated entity. Then actually the controls may be little more lesser. There also controls are required, but not as robust and not that many layers as required for a regulated entity. But depending on that, our audit procedures also can be downsized. So, basis the materiality of the process, our audit procedures also can be defined depending on the policies and procedures implemented in the organization. Next is the interface. So I think you may be aware. So though we say ERP, lot of times due to different constraints, it's not like one integrated system. They may have different systems of different brands and different products, and there may be something custom built, something bought out. But end of the day, you try to write APIs, or you may have some manual batch job initiated to push this data into that system to post entries. It is very common in an Indian scenario. I think globally also that phenomenon is there, where you it may be it may not be cost effective sometimes, or it may not, the business may be so unique that you don't have a ready-made product which will satisfy all your needs. There are different constraints because of which one integrated product is, like one ERP product is not possible. So many cases we'll be having a different product attendance system, different product HRMS system. In spite of this, they will be having a different finance or accounting system. So payroll will be run in a different system, which will not be fully integrated with the ERP, but the final journal entries may be posted into the ERP. So now all these type of transactions will actually require us to audit the interface controls. Okay, so this is a very, very key area. There are a lot of frauds that have happened in a lot of industries, banks, manufacturing, publishing. There are so many industries where actually frauds have happened due to lack of controls in the interfaces. That is, interface will be there, but they may not be a maker checker, or they may not be check counts or logs of like daily logs of how much data was generated in one system to how much data was posted into another system. Let's say daily approvals or daily reconciliations. Like this, there may be different controls which can be inbuilt into an interface. This control should be implemented, reviewed, monitored, as well as audited. Only then we can ensure data integrity across systems. So this is one of a very key control which we need to audit. So then it's master data management. So when we talk about application controls, after this access control and this data processing controls, the most important control will be our master file management. So like I told, the privileged users, because there they are having the backend full access. So there how critical it is for application. Master data is the most critical data, because if you put a wrong transaction, it is going to impact only that one transaction. But let's say we are going to create a wrong master data. So there may be thousands and thousands of records created against that master data. Let's say you have created one fake vendor. It is possible that to that one fake vendor, I could have raised more than 10,000 POs. So the controls required in creating a PO itself requires like maker, checker, authorizer, and all that. Now imagine what lot of control we should have in creation of vendor, because one PO will impact only one payment, but one master record is going to impact n number of payments, right? So master data management is a very, very important area which we'll be evaluating for audit trails also, workflow also, segregation of duties also. So these are the key components of application controls which we will be evaluating as part of our audit procedures. So easiest example was procurement, so I was relating to that. But on all audit cycles, this will be applicable. So whether you're auditing payroll, purchase, inventory, sales, whatever may be the business area, the same things will be applicable, and similar audit procedures will be required for every module of the ERP or the application used in the company. So in that, the technology infrastructure is going to be part of your general control. So we may not be doing that as part of ITAC. But the data security, the data recovery, all this is IT general controls, the overall infrastructure. So this middle line is going to be the place where we are going to evaluate our IT applications. So these are the various components which are required, or components of controls which are required to ensure that data captured is correct and processing is also correct. So over data processing, there are few more key controls which we need to evaluate that we'll be seeing in next slide. Okay. So key controls in ITAC is inherent controls. So inherent controls is what you are trying to ensure as data validation. So we saw examples of check digit. So PAN number, you enter a wrong check digit, it will, income tax will immediately say this is a wrong PAN. So something like that you can create for your customer code, vendor code, to ensure that there is no duplicate record, and at the time, not just for duplication of record, even for validation of the customer. So then making it alphanumeric, case sensitive, then limiting the numbers. So all this will be your inherent controls which we can look for in each screen of the module. Okay, so we can evaluate from vendor master creation screen, price master creation screen, PO creation screen, okay, PR creation screen. All in each screen we can look at different inherent controls. So even date controls. So let's say we are talking about audit procedure where we are talking difference between PR and PO. Okay, date difference between PR and PO. Or let's say without, if the PO is, there cannot be a invoice date before the PO date. So this type of conditions or input validations can be implemented as an inherent control itself. So if these type of conditions are evaluated or implemented as part of internal policies and procedures, and it's part of our inherent controls, then actually the audit steps required in this will be very less when we are going to talk about the audit procedure. Okay, but like the normal audit procedure, because it's a automated control which is directly available. So we can spend our audit time on a different area. So inherent control designing and implementation is a very important activity. So here, basis our initial, let's say we are auditing for the second year or third year, we should be in a position to actually educate the client and influence the client to implement as much as controls as inherent controls. Because whatever we are doing as audit test or audit analytics, identifying outlier, exception, these are all things which we can actually blanket control we can implement as an automated control. Like it is like so simple when if it is going to be a inherent control, wherein the control over the transaction is so robust, and you are able to, oh sorry, hope you can hear me. There's a power cut here. Anyways, so next we are evaluating embedded calculations. So in embedded calculations, what is that we are evaluating is the arithmetical accuracy of the transactions that are calculated. So let's say there's a plain invoice that is available. Okay, so in the invoice, what is the total? Okay, there's a GST calculation, at what rate it is calculating, how it is calculating, all that is going to be our embedded calculations. Okay, so next we are going to have even the material variance. Let's say at the time of GR, you are going to have a variance, let's say 5% variance, 3% variance. So all this will be coming under our embedded calculations. How it is implemented in the system. So next is configurable controls. These are like workflows which we are implementing. Let's say one more role is required in this particular workflow. If PO is more than this amount, it should go for this person for approval. If this thing is less than this thing, it should go for this particular department. Like that, you can actually configure different workflows and different controls over the transaction flow. So this may be part of the original design of the application, or it could be actually customized for the respective business process. So it can be a practice process, or it can be a business process which it is which we have developed for our particular organization. So all that will be our configurable controls. So these are also key controls which we need to evaluate, configurable controls. So next is the access control and security controls over the user. So end user. So we were talking about the this data input person. So this person's segregation of duties and delegation of powers is part of the key controls in ITAC. So next very important area, which as an auditor, as an internal auditor, we should have absolute control over is automated account posting. So there may be recurring entry posting. That is like every month you have to pass a rent entry. Every quarter this entry should be passed. All that will be like recurring posting. Similar to that, we may have other postings which are automated, like at the time of purchase invoice, when you account the purchase invoice, automatically in finance a purchase entry will be passed, right? When you raise a sale invoice, automatically that sale entry will come to accounts. So these are actually automated posting. So let's say manufacturing company, we'll take an example of manufacturing company. So as you make issues to against a production order, COGS is getting accumulated. Okay, and it is going to get stored. So what the COGS is going to do, it will be there until you pass a sale invoice against this production order. Once the invoice is raised, automatically it will post this COGS amount into my P&L as per matching concept. So now which all GL is there may be multiple GLs for cost of goods sold, right? So which all GLs or which all stock issues against which all cost centers or production orders, how it is getting mapped or captured into my COGS. This is an audit test which we need to do. It's a control testing. So one is you can look at on a data analytics or black box testing perspective, we can look at comparative percentages of COGS. We can look at different consumption ratios, product wise, vendor wise, a lot of things we can do. That was going to be a black box testing. Okay, so white box testing when we are going to do, that is when we are going to get on the court and do the audit on the system. What we'll be evaluating is this the GL mapping across different locations, different stock locations, different production, I would say cost, it's basically called as control accounts. Okay, so how control accounts are tagged to different types of stock issues. So that will be a key control activity which you can do as part of internal audit, wherein if you do this, we need not actually the risk around COGS getting posted wrongly or overconsumption or underconsumption and all will be like the perspective, the risk perspective of that audit procedure will become less when we are doing this audit procedure. So like that, we can evaluate and include different automated account posting evaluation. So mainly it will be GL tagging. So at the time of tagging GLs, how a particular data is mapped, how a particular control account is mapped, how a particular cost center is getting affected. So these things all will come under automated account posting. So these are the key important ITAC controls which we'll be evaluating along with internal audit. So our next area is going to be key controls in ITGC. So we have already discussed access controls and physical security. So next area which we need to monitor is log maintenance. So what all data will have logs, how the logs will be maintained, and what is going to be our audit procedure. As I told previously, all systems are going to generate logs. It can be application, it can be a network device, it can be server, it can be database. Everything is going to capture logs. So if we are going to enable logs and archive it forever, what is going to happen is your system performance may be low. So general configuration of these devices is going to be to capture minimal required logs, and surely they will configure error logs. Okay, the normal logs are fine. Okay, that is things are happening fine. Those things captured is fine. But if there's an error, crash reports, okay, edited entries, modified entries, all these are going to be key logs which are required for our audit purpose. So generally they enable logs for a period of 15 days or 30 days. Okay, or they will enable log wherein up to let's say 10 GB of data logs can be saved. After that, the old logs will automatically expire, or up to 4 GB logs will be there. After that, it will expire. Like that, they may have. But again, talking about regulated entities, there is regulation. You have to maintain all logs for 6 months. So how they are doing it is they are capturing logs from different systems, archiving it in a separate solution. Okay, a separate media drive or a separate location. So in this, what as an audit perspective we have to do as part of general control testing is, first thing, whether logs are enabled. Second thing, whether logs are captured. Okay, if both of this is there, next important thing is if logs are monitored. So if there is a crash report, okay, there is some hike or there is some overrun. So when these things are happening, you want to actually evaluate whether there is some corrective or preventive action that is taken basis this log report. Okay, so that is going to be our log monitoring exercise. So these are the key things which we'll be evaluating in the log monitoring. But apart from this, we can do this log monitoring exercise also. Like we can run tools to actually audit these logs. Like database logs are very, very critical, because if someone is going to modify data from backend, that is going to be like end of audit. Okay, because there is absolute no integrity over data process. So if something like that is a critical audit point. So let's say you want to run analytics over the database logs and identify the patterns. Okay, so then we can take the archived logs and we can run our analytics. So execute the control testing on these logs and identify exceptions, outliers, and then we can do root cause analysis also. But on a general control perspective, with the due skepticism, we have to evaluate the scope of log monitoring exercise we are going to do. But as I told, the basic thing is logs should be enabled, it should be captured, it should be monitored. This 3 itself is more than enough, but what to say, your client due diligence, skepticism, and fraud risk parameters that you are foreseeing, basis that we can do log analytics also. So next is configuration and change management. So here we are going to evaluate different aspects of changes. It can be hardware change, software change. It can be removing of a drive, change, upgrading a drive. For everything, there should be a change management process. There should be a initiator of change. There should be a approver for change. Someone should actually test the change before it is implemented into the new system. So there should be sufficient documents maintained for tracking the changes, so that in future, if something is wrong, some bug is there, you want to roll back and see what was the previous version of the system. There is adequate controls over that. So in our change management process, the most important thing will be like changes should be captured. Okay, there should be documentation of change, and your audit areas will be major changes impacting audit. So it's something related to business function. Okay, some module change, module level or application level change that is in the business function, any like big cost change, any migrations that have happened. Okay, maybe in front end there will be no change. Okay, but in the back end they have moved from MySQL to PLSQL. Actually, this is a change. Okay, that how we will know in front end when we are using application. Let's say we are using SAP application, we will never know what backend change they did. So only when we take all the change management records and evaluate what all changes have been done in the last year or during the audit period, then we will come to know what all infrastructure change or technical infrastructure change that has happened in the organization. So if there is a data migration that has happened, then we have to evaluate what type of audits were there, what type of controls were there at the time of doing this change. So all this also will be integral part of our IT general controls. So next important and a very important area, it will be actually a compliance requirement also under Companies Act and all, where we have to maintain backup of the data for respective years, and it should be in a form in which the data was originally generated. Okay, and it should be in a recoverable format. So let's say during the year there has been two applications in the organization. Like let's say from April to September, it was SAP. Okay, from October they have gone to Oracle. So now evaluate whether backup of the previous system is there, whether all the data from the previous system is already moved to the current system. Okay, let's say they are deciding to archive data older than 5 years. Okay, how have they archived? What is the access controls they have on the archived systems? All this will be like our key controls which we have to evaluate over the backup process. So on the current backups which they have configured, okay, in the live application, there's going to be some backup that they are taking, right? There, what all are going to be our key audit considerations are whether there is backup. Next is what is the frequency of backup, and what is the recovery time. Okay, let's say if it's going to be daily backup, your risk appetite should be like 24 hours data. So you will lose all the data that is, you should be ready to lose all the data that is generated for last 24 hours. Only then daily backup is fine. Otherwise, it should be real-time backup or hourly backup. So it's going to be basis our risk appetite. So next important thing I told is recovery. So not having backup alone is not sufficient. They have to do recovery testing. So so recently I broke my phone. So I took my old phone as a backup. Okay. And I identified that it did not on itself. So saving that phone as a backup phone was a total waste of time, space, energy, cost and all. So having some backup is not sufficient, but it should be able to recover that data. So one more example I can give for this backup recovery. So I had enabled WhatsApp backup. Every day it takes morning 5:30 a.m. WhatsApp backup. So when I went into my new phone and I tried to restore the backup, I don't know on what basis the backup got restored, but randomly I got 2,500 photos of 10,500 photos. So very critical part is recovery testing, whether whatever backup you are saving, you are able to retrieve it. Okay, whatever you are retrieving, whether it is complete. Okay, and how long you are taking to retrieve. Is it, if you are going to, if system is failing today it should be able to retrieve data and resume business today. It should not be like I'm recovering is taking 3 days, 4 days, downtime, server down, backup down, not able to restore full data. This and all is going to create business disruption. So backup, the main thing which we have to test during backup is recovery testing. So even though there is no disaster, even though there is no system failure, at least on a quarterly basis or half-yearly basis, depending on client's risk appetite, they should do recovery testing. So BCP and DR is going to be continuation of backup only, where we are auditing what type of business continuity the organization is planning. Like if there is a failure, how I'm going to manage in terms of my physical location, in terms of my backups which I have, in terms of my contracts with third parties, what type of SLAs I have with them. So it's more of a risk management process where I should have my disaster recovery plans and contingency plans. So these are the key controls which we have to evaluate in IT GC. So these are the things I had for discussion for today. I hope I delivered in a language which you can understand, and there was some value addition into our regular internal audit practice when we are including IT controls testing also. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. So actually we have few queries, but after unanswered session, let us take the question and answers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
Dear members, let's move on to next technical session. So next technical session is on reinvent or perish, artificial intelligence and data analytics in internal audit. For this, we have CA Anand sir. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of Bangalore Branch and Internal Audits Committee. Thank you so much for your valuable time, sir.
Sure.
To give a brief introduction about Anand sir, he is professionally a chartered accountant and a certified information system auditor, a passionate evangelist of our tech-based disruption in audit and finance domain. He is managing partner at AJA, an organization with focus in the area of forensic audit, IS audit, fraud analytics, and blockchain for internal audit function. He was part of risk management team at Goldman Sachs, covering multiple audits across much geography for different functions in the organization. His areas of specialization were forex audit, DP audits, anti-money laundering, Basel II, BCP, and operational risk. Prior to Goldman Sachs, he was with ES Consulting Groups at Infosys Technologies Limited, Bangalore. Here, he was involved in development of regulatory compliances framework for various compliances like Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and was part of team developing solutions for Basel II Accord implementation. His responsibilities included working in synchronization with project of Infosys Consulting, Dallas. He has been involved in enterprise risk management implementation and IT audit for many international projects at USA, UK, Japan, China, and he has been visiting faculty for IIM Bangalore, teaching IS audit and fraud analytics. He's speaker at North America CSCS and Euro CSCS of ISACA. He's visiting faculty of ISACA, ICI, and Wellinger Institute of Management. With this brief introduction, I welcome Anand sir for today's session.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you, Parindra. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So a very good evening, everyone, and wish you an advance Republic Day. Happy Republic Day to all of you. I think tomorrow is going to be a holiday, and all of you are at a session today. So I think that is one good thing out here. When I actually was discussing this topic, and I shared this topic with ISB and Bangalore branch, a couple of my friends also called me up. He said, Anand, your topic is very, very problematic. You're talking about something of reinvent or perish. It's a very harsh statement out there. You're trying to put it up. And why is that so? So the background to this presentation was the hurry, or I would say the urgency I want to show out here of why it's important for us today to discuss about AI and DA, which is nothing but artificial intelligence and data analytics in internal audit. Now, internal audit has been, I myself being from internal audit function, my first job itself was in internal audit function, and have worked across multiple organizations, multiple geographies. What I am actually seeing right now, and I'm sure over the 2 days, I'm the last speaker, so you have already heard some of the best speakers out there, like Shiva sir, and we have also Rajiv, who I personally are friends of mine, and Paul sir and everyone, and you have heard a lot of things which are changing. But one of the key things which is coming out, and I'm sure they touch upon few of them directly, indirectly, some of the points which I'm going to also discuss about, is that I would say there are two messages which are coming up very clearly. First message which is there is, we have to challenge the status quo. When I say status quo, there are things which are working in a manner, and it's good, for all of us know one very important thing: no one likes change, and when no one likes change, it's actually always a good thing to just be in your I would say that happy state which we are in. But I'm sure all of you have read this book called Who Moved My Cheese, and that is a very interesting book because you are happy for a point of time, and then suddenly you see that everything around you, or the whole environment has changed. And that's the reason when I was actually working on this presentation, and I have actually taken from some of my old presentations some content, and there are some new things which we have observed over a period of time. So there are some learnings which I also like to share with all of you, which I'm trying to bring it out there. And please feel free to interrupt me. I think we have question answers in the end, but I'll be monitoring the chat session. If there are anything which comes, I'll try to see if I can actually interrupt. You can interrupt me, and I'll more than happy to keep it up. I'm the last speaker, and I think me and Deepika will be there to answer the questions which are going to be there. But feel free. So, starting, there has been a lot of change happening around us. And one of the favorite things which I always say is history repeats itself. And when I say history repeats itself, it's not the same thing which will happen in history. I just want to quote one of the things. When I joined Goldman Sachs and my induction was done, we were given the case study of Barings Bank. I hope all of you heard about the Barings Bank case study, where one of the biggest, oldest bank of UK closed down because of one single person. And that name of that person was Nick Leeson. If you have not heard about this case study, I would highly recommend you to go and Google the word Barings, Barings, and you will you'll know that one of the biggest and the oldest bank, which was also known as the Queen's Bank, in UK, was sold for £1 to the ING group for £1. Okay, and that is something which happened something in 1994, 1995. And that used to be one of the case study which was given to us when I joined Goldman Sachs in my induction in the MCD, which was that time the internal audit division. And they said it's so important that you can't just sit on the ivory towers and think that things are working in the manner which are there. There are, business is dynamic, the business environment is dynamic, and digital disruption is happening in every field. Now, if digital disruption is happening in other field, don't you think IA as a function should be in the forefront of that? Because we are also known as something we call as, the strategic, I would not say, there was different term which was used in many of the organization, but we are also known as, preferred advisor to the business to tell them about what are the things they are doing in terms of managing the risk, optimizing the efficiency and effectiveness of the whole organization functions. Now that was which happened in 1994. And then how many of you are aware of one another case which happened in Society General, where there was a single person trader and Jerome Kerviel, and this gentleman actually did unauthorized trading worth around $8.8 billion. Now, when that case happened, my boss called me up and said, see, we have been talking about the history repeat itself. You see, everyone knew that this similar thing, unauthorized trading, has happened in Barings Bank. They all had controls, they all had the processes, everyone was making risk control metrics, testing the controls, but the whole environment just changed. Your landscape which was there has changed, and it has happened again. And Society General was the second largest bank in Europe, if you are all aware of, and it was something which has also won the award for the best risk managed bank in Europe award in just 2007 and 2008 this happened. Now why I'm telling you about these two cases is I think that is a learning for all of us, that we should learn from history that nothing is permanent. The processes, the good practices, I don't use the word best practices now because what is best for you may not be best for me. So there are only good practices, and we have to see there's no one size fit all. And in that given situation, it becomes very important that we need to understand the whole process in terms of this. So that is something which becomes an important part and parcel of the thing. So that was the, I would say my starting point. I wanted to just give you an example of how we should learn from history. It's not, when we say history repeats itself, it doesn't mean that, okay, whatever has happened, same thing will happen. It is similar things which are going to come out there. And in the same line, I would like to, talk about something which I think I would have talked about multiple times, but this is one of my favorite area. So I don't mind repeating it. And this is the picture of Luddites, the leader of Luddites. And if you Google the word Luddites or the dictionary meaning of Luddites, this were basically the protest groups. And these protest groups used to be operating between 1811 and 1816. And they were basically in the UK, the garment workers who were against mechanizations which were happening at that time. So today, this word Luddites are for anyone who is against adopting of technology or oppose new technology or is not ready to or struggles with that. Now, we all know there are being always a lot of fear which has come when the automation happened. That, if automation happens, is going to change what will happen to our work. But we all know more and more areas opened up for the people who went for automation, because now they are able to see what they never actually had an insight about at early point of time. And when I was talking about the history repeat itself, we have to learn from the history, because today we are in Industrial Revolution 4.0, and all of you have heard about that, so I'll not deep dive into that. But you see one thing in this Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3, 4, each of the time, Industrial Revolution 1 was steam, It was replaced by electricity in Industrial Revolution 2, and Industrial Revolution 3 was all electronics, and Industrial Revolution 4 is all about CPS or cyber physical systems. Now, what does it mean is at all point of time, we are seeing change happening. And one of the very interesting review about the industrial revolutions were that the average age of every industrial revolution has been decreasing. Now, what I mean by decreasing, so let's say, for example, Industrial Revolution 1, it took close to around, it was there for around 180 years. Industrial Revolution 2 was only for around 95 or 100 years. Industrial Revolution 3 was only for 30, 35 years. And we are talking on Industrial Revolution 4 is not going to be more than for 15, 20 years. That's the thing when we actually get into Industrial Revolution 5. And this learning from history is that nothing is permanent and everything is going to change. And that is also about adapting, digital transformation. And there is a silent disruption which always comes. Have you noticed this thing happening that, things just, seems rosy, everything is going fine, and you're saying, okay, I'm in the control, I'm on top of the world. And suddenly it's all like haywire. Now, you just see this in 10 years' time, UBS trading floor from 2005 to 2016 is totally gone. And that just happened because one silent technology, which is called, as I'm sure all of you have used it, algorithmic trading, changed the whole game out there. You don't require so many humans to trade anymore. You don't require such a big trading floor anymore. You have machines, cloud platforms, and everything which will take care of all of the things. That algorithm which will do all the buying and selling out there. Now, most interesting thing which I just wanted to bring it out is when disruption happens, it doesn't come with a big bang that, oh my God, it's going to change, everything is going to change, and let's be prepared for that. No, it's going to be silent. See, today we are all at home, and during the pandemic, we are surviving. I hope you remember just 5 years back, I'm just not going very far off, just 5 years back, what was the cost of internet connectivity in our country? Or a mobile phone connectivity where 1 GB of data would cost you around $250. And do you think that would have actually sufficed to that? We have moved, we have disrupted the technology, we have LTE and other things, which has actually moved us silently. And everything what used to be taken as a luxury is now becoming an essential part right now. Now, that is something which we need to learn about from around us. And I think it's needed a lot of strategic thinking that this adoption is happening very fast in every field. Take example of all these technologies out there. The telephone, to reach 100 million consumer or customer, it took 75 years. The World Wide Web took 7 years to reach 100 million. Facebook took 4 years. Insta, 2 years to reach 100 million. And we all know one of my favorite games is Pokemon Go. And that took hardly 1 month to reach 100 million. Now, this is the speed we are talking about, friends. This is the speed at which things are moving. So it's just the matter of time. I just told you this took 10 years. The next time it changes, it's going to be much faster because there are a lot of things which are changing around us. Now that brings to our topic, the main topic today on the AI and DH stuff. Now I would like to talk about mostly on AI, and I had a source of one of the survey which was done by for the global CFOs by PwC. I'm just giving the source, and that was a very interesting thing that on finance and audit function, what are the technology which are going to have biggest impact? And this survey was done something around in 2019, just before the start of pandemic. So I'm sure pandemic has accelerated it, and there are going to be changes on that. Now, this survey had a very interesting point. It was talking about RPA, basic AI, and blockchain. They said near-term basic AI is actually going to that. But you can see as we move into the horizon of next 3 years, the advanced intermediate and basic AI is going to be the, maybe on average it will be around 70-75% of all the technology which are going to be used by the finance and audit functions. And this impact is telling us that there are going to be a very interesting time in the future. And when these things happens, we cannot be sitting in a kind of ivory tower that, okay, this is not going to impact me much. Because when all the organizations, because there is a very interesting statement made by, I'm sure you've heard about this statement that every business is a digital business now. So every business is digital. This was actually one of the cover story of Harvard Business Review, that every business is digital business. We cannot say that any business you are in, there are disruptions which are happening, there are changes which are happening, and that is bringing us on the change cycle which is there. So then deep diving into the genesis. So there is one interesting paper which it's a kind of a research paper published by two researchers, which was actually on reimagining audit, and they basically linked audit with industrial revolution. And I would highly recommend you can just see that thing. You can Google reimagining audit 4.0 and you will get the whole paper out there on the web. I just took one part of that thing. That's the source of this slide which I'm showing you, that there is a kind of a talk about the mirror world, the cyber physical system or mirror world. Businesses are becoming highly integrated. Today, if you ask any head of finance or any head of audit, what are the biggest challenge which they are facing when they do DA or ML, AI, they say it's quality of data, because we are generating a huge amount of data, but we don't even know what is the thing. Now, the mirror world, which we are talking about, which we are reimagining, is an environment which is just not taking one part, which is like the internal data of your ERP systems. It can be SAP, Oracle, you name it, Microsoft Dynamics, any of the things. But we are actually trying to link it with your supplier data, your other organizations, reconciling it and actually trying to see that are we having all of these things in a real-time basis in a decentralized control manner. Gone are the days when centralized businesses are going to be the future. Now it is basically a loosely coupled business function which are working together to take that forward. And in that world, Audit 4.0, we have multiple open APIs which are working with multiple things, blockchains and other things, and trying to do that. Now, this is more of a little futuristic statement, but we have to start moving towards that. I was attending one of the international conference which happened in New York of IIA in 2017, and there was a very interesting question which was asked to the head of audit of AIG, which is one of the biggest insurance business firm. And they said, what are the biggest challenge you find in audit? Okay, he said, good data for analysis. Now, that is one of the things. Organizations are getting a huge amount of data, but is that data worth it? Now, we all know the case of XBRL in MCA. I hope I'm just trying to say something which is in the public domain. MCA had, been asking people to file XBRL, tagged documentation out there. Initially, whatever filing was done all went for a toss because the way they were actually capturing the data itself was all wrong. So they have to rebuild the whole database and take that forward and then work in the manner which is there. And now it's stabilized. But what is the learning which is there is you have some prerequisite for everything which we try to do. And the mirror world, which we call it up, is actually mirroring your business in terms of data. And there is a kind of data getting generated from everything, from machines, from your boilers, from IoT devices, you name it, it's all out there. And this models of control, prediction, prevention, planning handles the whole of the risk management function of an organization and actually helps you try to do it in a different way. Now, how AI is helping audit on a broader side, I'll actually deep dive into that, because when I talk about AI, friends, I just give it a bigger terminology. AI is multiple things. There is NLP, natural language processing. Let's say, for example, I'm just right now, having this talk going out there, and whatever I am trying to speak out, you can see on your screen right now, right? Now, the whole reason you can see it is it's a natural language processing. So if some of our senior members are there, they know that 15 years back, we used to have one software called Dragon Naturally Speak. And that software used to be, a big thing. And you have to train the software for more than 300 hours or 600 hours to be able to speak properly so that you can actually dictate to the computers. And today this is something which is happening. We have a lot of things like Alexa, Siri, and all the things have changed. Now that this is also AI, but I'm not talking about this AI for others. It can be also used. So the idea about AI in audit, I'll just stop it for you. I think it's better for you to just listen to me, is more on predictive value. And we'll see which part of AI which is being used out there. A risk-based assurance for fewer controls. Now, imagine an end state. I'm just telling imagine because this is all about reimagining audit, that every control in your RACM or risk control matrix is linked to a kind of analytics, which is based on ML, which is on a continuous basis, checking everything and bringing you up only the exceptions which the audit function can review it up. Don't you think that would be a very interesting end state which can come up? It will take time to be there, but that's something which should be there. There is a lot of time and cost saving. We all know the budgets which are there. There can be a better use of the audit functions in terms of looking at ethics and secondary checks, which trying to take it to one level outside of our domain itself and try to add value. As the preferred advisors to the business, we can actually always add more value in terms of what we are trying to do that. And the last but not least, I already talked about that in the beginning, but predictive value. Now, when I say predictive value, a lot of time we have tools in our hand, but we don't know how to use it. When I say predictive value, I'll just give you an example out here. All of us have heard about time value, or when we are trying to see that you are doing some analysis out there, which is time series. Now, time series analysis is basically a statistical model which people use to predict what is going to happen. Now, everyone knows that is something called time series, which is there, which can be used. But now, how to practically use it along with AI? How can we predict it up? Now, imagine where I can actually do it up, that I have in my audit universe, which is pretty big, and I want to cover my whole audit universe out here. But I have limited bandwidth of my team, or in my audit universe, I have around 6 subsidiaries which are there. So which subsidiary do I pick up? Now, I can do a kind of a random check or based on the business, but we have all learned from some of the biggest failure in the business world. If you have heard about the Wirecard failure, that fraud never happened in the head office or where the maximum business was happening. It happened in somewhere in Far East country, right? Now, which means you have to cover your whole audit universe. Now, how do I basically see where I can actually go for it? So the predictive value comes from multiple parameters, which we would have never ever thought of. Now, let me make just a situation. You have a subsidiary which is there in Sri Lanka, and suddenly you see that the sales is increasing, but the sales of our competitors are not increasing. Point number one. You suddenly see that our inventory is piling up in our warehouses. So sales is increasing, but where our inventories are also increasing. There are a lot of sales return which are happening. Couple of people in sales team and accounts team have resigned, and you see that suddenly there is a kind of my debtors is increasing and my cash collection has stopped. Now, all these things individually are just red flags. But when you combine it together, you can predict that something is not okay happening in my subsidiary in Sri Lanka, and I need to take some kind of corrective actions. Now, can we predict that kind of things out here? Now, it's possible because humans can see things basically maximum from 2 to 3 dimensions. But for machines to actually set up connectivity or seeing things from n dimensions, and it can be anything, it's very easier for them, and they can actually see connections between things which as humans sometimes we may not even think of that. Now that is actually at 30,000 feet which I want to talk about. Let's deep dive into that. Let's try to understand one part of the whole thing which is going to be a game changer. I'm talking about machine learning, because if you talk about artificial intelligence, it's a huge area. There are bots, there are natural language processing, there are areas on log mining, other things, a lot of things are there. I'll not go into all of them because I don't even have the time or bandwidth on that. I have to finish by 7:15. So let's talk about one part here, which is on machine learning, which is a key part of AI. And what is machine learning? Let's try to understand and how it can be used in audit. So if I have to go by the definitions, we all love definition. There's a nice definition by Tom Mitchell from Carnegie Mellon University. He says a computer program is said to learn from experience E with respect to some task T and some performance measure P if the performance as T is measured by P with experience E. I know it doesn't make any sense for you, but if I have to make it very simple for you, about learn from patterns. If you do a task repeatedly, you will learn from the experience that, okay, this point part of the day, I hope you have seen this Google Maps, where it will predict you what time are you leaving, and based on time, how much time it will take for you, because it has already a pattern, how much traffic is there at that area at that point of time. If you're leaving in Bangalore at evening 6:30, that whole stretch of location will take you around maybe around 30-40 minutes. And if you're going that during at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe you'll be able to cover it in 15 minutes. Now that is something which is learning from the past experience. That is experience, and once you have learned it up, you will be able to predict it up there. It's similar to if you tell a kid, don't play with fire. He's playing with matchstick and you say, don't play with fire. Do you think the kid will listen to you? Maybe yes, maybe no. But the moment he burns his finger with the fire, do you think he will again play with the fire? No. Now that exactly is the concept of machine learning. See, if you try to talk to many of the experts on how machine learns, it's very difficult to tell you that. But ultimately, it's a statistical model where you're trying to make sure the algorithm is based on the past experience. Yes, a lot of time funny things also happen when you're doing machine learning, but it's an interesting area altogether. And what has happened is there has been what I call is democratization of knowledge. There was a time when there were, it's something like sharing the fire with others. So when there was a time earlier when only few people had access to fire, and they will only share that fire with only few people. So it was not something which was available for the masses. But there are some things which has changed over the past, which I'll actually share with you and discuss with you, which has made it possible for sharing the fire with all of us. And it makes it much easier. So what happens in machine learning is I try to teach the program in a manner that it does this task multiple times. And for machines, they don't get tired. And the best example of this would be an example of AlphaGo. I hope all of you have heard about this term called AlphaGo. So I'm not going about this. Okay, Go is one of the strategy game which is more complex than chess. So all the people who were into AI, it was their goal that if a machine can play Go and beat the world champion of Go, that would be one of the best thing which can happen, where we can actually show the superiority of the machine learning. And Google had a company which is a subsidiary called DeepMind, and they basically made a model called AlphaGo. And this program was basically made to, just like in chess we have the rules, this is a rule of the game, they teach the rule of the game. And the machine learned from matches which were played by the expert, by just seeing the matches which were played, recorded matches, and by playing itself. So there were version 1, version 2, and version 1 is playing with version 2. And they played the game more than 30,000 times. So the learning is actually equivalent to a learning of playing 60,000 games, because 30,000 on version 1, 30,000 on version 2, it was matched. Now, this is the kind of thing which was done. And I would highly recommend you, if you get a time, there is a very nice documentary on YouTube on AlphaGo, and you should go through it. I'm sure some of you are also watching this on YouTube. You can just open AlphaGo, ALPHA, Go, and you'll find out everything about that. Now, when we are talking about all of these things, how are the different types of machine learnings are there? So there is a supervised machine learning, which is mostly task-driven. Regression, we have all done regressions. So it's basically trying to solve a classification problem. When we have multiple things, we want to put in different bins and all things. So you can classify the data and everything into a different set to find out the anomalies are there. And anomaly detection is something which is very important for us in terms of an IA function, because that's something which gives us understanding about what are the things which we need to investigate and take that further action on. There is also unsupervised learning, which is very interesting because of two reasons. First is very unpredictable. You don't tell machine that how you have to do that. It just, you give the data to the machine, and the machine will basically learn itself. Now, if some of you have already done programming and other things, or if you have played with tools like IDEA or ACL and done coding for them, you understand that what has been taught to us all, because I was also a computer science student at 10+2, we would say that first you understand the logic, write the program, and connect the data source. Here it is different. Here I just load the data source, let the machine learn the logic, and write the code itself. Now that's a very different approach altogether, which we should be aware of. Okay, so that's unsupervised. And reinforce is something which is very interesting, because this is a mix between that. I don't tell the machine everything, but I just keep on supervising it for some part and see how it is actually coming out. And based on that, I try to see what are the things which I can actually fix on and take that forward. So that is what we call as reinforcement learning, which is there. Now, primarily, these are the three types of that. Some of the people will talk about multiple things, but that's how it is. So you basically take a data set, you extract the features from the data, and it builds up the machine learning algorithm itself, and it can help you in grouping of objects together when you want to do it. And I'll talk about some of the use cases out here later in my presentations. So this is how machine learning works. Now, that's a great thing, but how can we use it in our day-to-day thing? See, machine learning itself was not very powerful, but what has actually linked to that is we have a huge amount of data, and not just data, friends. We have something which I call nowadays, a big data, which is there. Now, when I say big data, I'm talking about sites like, one moment, I'll just open it for you and show it to you. I hope you have gone to data.gov.in, which is the site where Government of India is actually sharing a lot of data with anyone who would like to do that for economic purpose and everything. So we have data.gov.in. We have statistics where service providers are providing you with all kind of data, which basically means that you just don't have to be reading and living in isolation. Okay, and anyway, I'm not providing any of them. I'm just trying to give an example of what are the different types of data sources which are there. So we have data.gov, and there are a huge amount of data across multiple platforms. This data can help us do things which earlier used to be a kind of a problem statement for any person in the IA function, because that was something which was not there. So we have an explosion of digital data, and this data, more the data, the better ML modes comes up there. And this also brings up a lot of unstructured data, which earlier we never used to be able to process or play around with them. But today, with all the tools and technologies, which I'm just sharing some of the open source which are there, you can actually deal with a huge, large volume of data. You can deal with a lot of external data source which are there. We can deal with unstructured data which are there in paper format, or you're requiring ICR or OCR to basically read that. We can do statistical models, machine learning, real-time analysis, and very good visualizations with all of the things. And what is the most interesting thing, guys, out here? You can see the whole, the universe of this data are more or less open source, which makes them very interesting. I was attending one of the session, presently the head of audit at Americas for Society General is one of my senior from Goldman, Adesh Gandhari, and he was speaking recently on how their IA function basically adapted machine learning. And they said we had challenges in terms of using tools and all the thing, and going for data scientists and all thing. And a better thing, what they did is they took this tool 9 and trained the whole IA function that, okay, why don't you guys know business better? Here's the tool, learn the tool, and now start using it. and that didn't have any impact. The only thing they had to basically focus is on a trading budget, and the rest of the thing, all the tools which they needed was open source and available easily for them. So that's the kind of changes which are happening out here in the thing. So this is basically a democratization of what I call as knowledge, and democratization of the environment which was there. Because there was a time when tools like SAS and other things, and nothing wrong about them, but they were highly expensive tools, for making sure it is there. So people used to think that, can I live without them? And that was the only thing which go. But with all of these things, what you see, it makes life easier for everyone in terms of dealing with this analysis and taking it forward. Okay. These are some of the very mostly I would say extensively used tools in this areas right now. Line, SQL, Python, R, Power BI, Excel, and Power BI is not as part of every Office 365 thing. So all of them have become like something which we call it as more or more, a kind of part and parcel of the day-to-day environment. And on top of that, there is something very interesting which is happening. This is the most interesting thing I would say which has happened in 2020 onward, where we have an environment where your algorithms for AI have become open source. It never thought of this will happen ever. So you can see this is H2O.ai. I hope you can see that. And they have all their algorithms. This platform is totally open source. So you use this open source platform for doing any of the thing. And that's interesting because, you have to earlier you have to code all of the things, and now you have a complete ready-made platform which can actually help you do that. So the world around us is changing big time. And then there are new things which is coming. Earlier data analysis was all about, okay, here is the data and tell us what is there with that. Now you can see this is showing data, and the other one is showing or storytelling data. So one of my mentor who is also a CAE, he was telling me one time, the vision of a CAE should, or internal audit function should be that when we go for presentations with the audit committee, we are not, there with a PowerPoint presentation of what has happened and all things, but on a real-time basis, show it on their, on your iPad, that here is the complete, environment, what is happening in my audit universe, what are my controls working, not working, and it basically works in one way. That's something which we call as, like, are we showing the data or are we storytelling with the data? And you can see the difference out here, that we are just telling about the ticket trends, how many tickets came, how many we were able to solve. On the other side, we are saying that we are not able to meet all the tickets which are open or all the issues which are there. And that is becoming one of the big challenge. But there have been some very interesting cases which is there in terms of doing it. I was talking to someone, one of the CE from Pune, and he was telling me something very interesting they have done in the organization, where single-handedly the gentleman has gone ahead and changed a lot of things. So storytelling with data brings together our knowledge of the business, which we already have it, and trying to bring to them that, hey, this is how we can be a preferred advisor in terms of the work and everything, and we can add a lot of value to the organizations in terms of dealing with that. Now, this is the first part. Let's try to talk about some of the success stories which has happened, how people are using it, and it is across the board. I'm just giving some examples out here. Accounts payable function is one of the key areas, and with the number of transaction which happens in any organization, it's very tough to keep a track of your third-party risk management and all things. So how do we identify, taking into account the master data and the transaction data, and trying to see that, okay, these are the information which is there for me. Can I see a trend? Can I actually put an ML model on that, where it can be a supervised learning, where I can say that as a human, I can take a sample size of maybe 100 or 300 vendors, analyze their data and say that I think these are some of them looks suspicious, and that learning can be fed into the system, and the system can basically tell me, okay, this is how I have also tried to work on the same model. There is gut feeling which is there. And accounts payable function is one area where investment never goes bad, because that is something which has been able to add a lot of value to organizations in terms of dealing with that. The second one is on bad debts, where you can predict customer defaults. Customer defaults can be predicted because you will see there are some patterns which emerge, anytime when a customer default, he would be using maybe 100% of his credit limit. His payment or orders will become scanned. He's not responding to the calls of the account managers and all thing. So if you take into account all of that thing, a prediction of based on the data points can be easily done. Spend analytics. This is one very interesting thing. As humans, it's very tough to do it, but machines can see the data from multiple things and see a relative factors among that and try to bring it out. That one of the case of one of a client, we figured out that the Philippines office was the most expensive office in terms of square feet rent they are paying across. It was more costlier than even their New York office, and that only happened when you tried to feed all this data. And this was this alert came actually from the machine saying that here is something which is anomalies are there, and that brought it out there. GL code reviews on a real-time basis, because we all know how many times wrong GL codes are used for this. But based on the past booking of similar transaction, it is very easily, you can actually have the patterns where the machine can learn from the pattern itself. That in your SAP or Oracle, when you are doing the entry, this is a GL code you're using for this vendor and this kind of item codes and all things, and those code can be easily looked into that. If you are using Ariba and other tools like that, identifying collusion with vendors, where a lot of information which is captured about the vendors in their auctions or reverse auctions and other things can give us an idea about what's happening, what are the information which has been shared, and are there any kind of collusion with the vendors which can come and which can lead to a further investigations on the ground in terms of doing it. On the banking side, it's already being brought out in Basel III, where Basel III itself is saying that please use AI and ML in non-performing asset monitoring and analyzing the root cause for that. And this is like something which is there in Basel III. So all the banking teams are actually going for that, and it's actually predicted. It has been asked by RBI also to try to use as much as possible. Last but not least, one of the area which is a very I would say if you see volume-wise very high, value-wise very less, is T&E function. If you are using tools like Concur or any other tools where you're capturing a lot of information about the travel, I know last 2 years has been very interesting, where there was no travels at all, but in future there are going to be travels, and a situation like that, if you want to predict on which are the transactions which are suspicious, that can be interesting things which can come up in terms of looking at that and seeing, hey, okay, these are the things which we need to understand, take it forward, and basically, make it work in terms of doing that. So these are some of the examples which I thought I'll share with you. There are multiple use cases which are floating around with that. This is something which I'm very confident because we have done it up, but there are hundreds of other examples which are there, and people are saying that, okay, we have tools are there in the thing. We have to just see how we can actually do it out there. But having said about the success stories, there's one thing which I want to talk about. This is the sources, some of the research which is done by the AI Institute of Deloitte. There are some guiding principle to this, and this is very important. I would try to do that, especially for IA functions. If you want to harness this AI capabilities, I would say IA is like it's a mirror image of AI. So we should actually take it up to our things, that it can give us a lot of new opportunity and competitive advantage. And the key finding is every organization which is there, they have to set up or communicate a bold vision on that. The vision will be, there are not going to be all successes. They're going to be an experimental approach where we start with a POC, a proof of concept, and try to take it up there. And many of the respondents also says that it will help, AI can help achieve your differentiating strategy, because you can actually differentiate yourself from the competitors and add a value, more than 1.7 times of the outcomes of high degree in terms of, increasing the effectiveness and efficiency of that thing. And the people in the team has to know about the thing. But one of the key things which I want to really highlight, and that is something which is a lot of mistake is there, never ask a data scientist to drive your AI strategy, because this is a kind of big learning which a lot of people had. Data scientist is very good in knowing the tools, but he has a hammer, he has a harness, he has the thing. He will try to use them for everything. He doesn't understand the business. You understand the business, and that is the reason you can have data scientists. It's always good to that, but the driving of that should never be done by IT. It should be driving by the AI function, or I would say included functions. They have to look into that and do it. and never over-index on our efficiency goal. It will not be efficient at the initially. You need to understand that running ML and other things requires a lot of data and time. So initially it will take some time before you can get maybe around at least 10 to 12 months before you can actually have good data which can make it up there. So making efficiency as a goal would not be a game. So this is one of the key guiding principles which goes into working on that. The advantage of using of AI in IA is it will help us in increasing our audit quality, because gone are the days when we have to have sample checks and all things. When each of your control recom can be linked with an ML and it is running on the thing, it will actually try to help us improve our audit quality and also reduce the audit business risk at a very low cost. When I say low cost, is pretty much right now become as at a cost which is like very very small compared to what the benefit you're getting at there. So that's the kind of thing which can add it up there. And overall audit cost in terms of human resource can be reduced, and we can actually focus on work which can add more value in terms of doing the repetitive tasks again and again. No one wants to do the repetitive tasks, so the repetitive task can be actually put into that. And the quality of audit as well as the efficiency in terms of audit delivery speed and count, what we are covering, can be easily done. And that adds to something which we call it as a continuous monitoring, which means at any point of time we have all this information at our fingertips. We can actually do that. And with technologies which is enabling AI and DA, there is a lot of flexibility which can be there in terms of making sure that they can be tweaked to the environment, and there's a lot of self-improvement which happens. Now, this is the good thing and the guiding principle which goes, but there are some challenges also which I want to talk to in the end. And challenges are very interesting, friends, here. The challenges are in auditing AI areas and working on that is having a very good business understanding. I again want to reiterate on the fact that if you want to have a very good AI and data analytics, working organization, focus on business understanding. Don't focus on the technical know-how. That is something you can actually just always have it. That's not a big deal. But knowing the business, knowing this, and there is no one size fit all. There has always been a kind of point that there's no one size fit all. So we need to focus on terms of having a good business understanding, and that is something which is non-negotiable at all. Second is the data understanding your data. I'll give you one example. We were trying to do some work for Ariba for one of the organization, and we figured it out that they had not configured some parameters to be captured at. If that are not even captured, it doesn't make sense to do that analysis, because those parameters are supposed to be captured, and then only it will add value in terms of managing the whole thing up. So I need to look into that data understanding. I need to understand how much data am I having and what data I'm having, what is the quality of data, and are there, let's say, for example, I'll give you a very interesting example. One of our client is a US client which is in restaurant business, and there is a kind of a very problematic thing which happened, that if you take their sales data during the COVID time, their sales data is completely different than their pre-COVID time, and it's a chain of large chain across the US North America thing. Now, when you are trying to analyze the data, what does statistics say? Statistics says that you need to remove the anomalies. Okay. But my data science mind says, no, I need to factor in any kind of black swan event, okay? So take both of things. The data preparation becomes a very important thing, and modeling and developing it along with data preparation is something which we need to look into that. You have to factor it, okay, this data, if I'm not analyzing, it's okay, but there can be another analysis which can say that in case of worst case scenario, what is the worst case scenario in case of a pandemic situation, or in case of a natural calamity, we can actually factor that part also. So that becomes the modeling and development of that. So that challenge is still there to understand it up and trying to do according to the business and working with them. And then comes, this is the most interesting thing, evaluation of the model which you are trying to do before deployment, because once you have deployed, you have actually put it something which is working at 30,000 rpm, something which is rotating at a very fast, and the data will be keep coming and all thing. So there should be a proper testing which has to be done, and before the deployment we have to evaluate it up whether the model makes sense. There have been cases, if you are aware of that, there is a very interesting case study which happened was in California. So the police department basically what they did was they wanted to place the police car in high crime areas. Wherever there are more crime, they wanted to make sure that police cars are put there and the siren is going on and the lights are blinking in the night. But what they found was that there was an algorithm which was built on multiple parameters, and it was supposed to send the GPS location where the police patrol car should be stationed. But they found that more and more patrol cars are going into black neighborhoods, and there's no kind of connection between the crime which is happening and the neighborhood where the cars are going. When they actually rework on the model, they found that the model has given a very high weightage to whether this is a white neighborhood or a black neighborhood. And if it is a black neighborhood, the rating was like, okay, you should actually focus on that, because it was little racist. And then they have to rework it out, because even the models are developed by humans, and humans have biases, and it's possible that the models can be having biases which has to be looked into. And then there are one of the very important thing which I say is deployment and the accompanying change management process. Now, a lot of time people will ask, once you have actually gone into this model, oh, you're saying this is coming out, can you explain how it is coming? Now, this is one of the biggest challenge in ML. It will throw out the numbers, it will say this is what is happening, and you will also find it correct. But if you're trying to go and rework and say, how did it come, that becomes a challenge. I know in data analytics, we have already all have been told about one thing, that if you do a data analytics, you have to actually, document the complete steps which you have taken, that anyone else who does the steps should get the same result. Now, in ML, it cannot be 100% done on a way. You can document how you have done it, all of the things you can do, and other people can actually run the same model again. But having said that, depending, if it is the same data, same thing, yeah, it will be giving you the same result. But in case of even a minor variation in the data or anything, it will change the way we are done. So the accompanying change management process has to be something which we need to do with. And then putting the operation of the model and performance in production itself is a big thing, because once you put in production, it's like something which is continuously working and taking it forward. So we have to, understand this. So these are some of the challenges which are there in terms of data. So overall, friends, I just wanted to summarize on this point that whenever we are talking about that, there is a learning from history, that a lot of changes which are happening, and this changes, when it comes, it actually impacts every one of us. And either we can be leaders, we can be the ladders. So the leaders are the people. If you see, there is a very interesting case study which has come in Harvard Business Review on the Fortune 500 companies. They say an average life 500 list is 3.5 years. Average life. The companies there, for a very long time, apart from the oil companies, are those companies who are ready to experiment, having an experimental mindset. They are the people who are always doing controlled experiments. When I say controlled experiments, they're actually saying, okay, I will budget up a small thing which I want to play around with that. And those areas adds a lot of value in terms of managing the overall growth of the organizations and changing and bringing value to the organizations. And here it's also very important to understand that it's not like something magic trick, it's just going to happen. It's a kind of a process which you need to start with that. You need to take, I would say, baby steps in terms of doing it up. Come up with a strategy. Try with a small experimental ML in first year, or first 6 months or first 3 months. Do a POC, play around with that. Talk to other colleagues of yours. They'll give you a lot of ideas in terms of what you can do, and then try to see which is going to work. And always remember one thing very important: no one size fit all. If this has worked for one of your other colleagues, it may not work for you. So we have to see that and take it with a pinch of salt, and then try to manage it. So friends, that's something which I wanted to tell you with that reinvent or perish, because IA has to be adapting ML and DA as a kind of antidote against any kind of challenges which can come into that. And with every organization becoming a digital business, we have a kind of a duty to ensure that we adapt to this environment. Thank you very much for a patient sharing on a 25th evening. Any questions? I'm open for any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So let's take few questions and answers.
Yes.
I think Sivaram sir is not there. I hope all the speakers, other panelists can answer these questions. So let's see. So Mr. Sampath Kumar is asking, can there be a rating process to judge extent of meeting stakeholders' expectations? If so, what do you suggest?
Okay, it's a Sivaram sir question, but I'll just try to answer it up. Or Deepika, you would like to go for it, or shall I answer it up? Okay, I think.
Please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So I think yes, there is always there are matrices has been always used across organizations in terms of doing. You can, if you are actually, I'm just trying to give the answer from a little data point perspective. Excuse me for that, because I attended Sivaram sir's sessions and I was listening to what he was saying. But the key thing which is very important here is you can have matrices for everything. I'm just trying to show you one matrix which is built from a perspective of not getting the environment created from a perspective of stakeholder need has been met or not, but I'm talking about something which is let me share my screen quickly. Here you go. So on Tableau, every organizations are making dashboards nowadays. This is on Concur data. Some areas where you can actually make matrices. You have to understand what are the things which are there. There are way of capturing based on that you can have multiple analysis which can be done. So I would say yes, there are many ways of doing it, and Sivaram sir being someone who's heading Titan and other things, he knows more on that kind of thing. So that might think, if Deepika would like to add, you can please add something. Yeah,
thanks, sir.
Okay.
So next question is from Yasha. The major issue in internal audit so far is the remuneration efforts ratio is not up to the mark. Much more is expected from us than paid. So like that, they're just giving some suggestion.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But then you should automate it up and make sure. I hope all of you have read this nice article sometime back. There was a gentleman in US. What he did is he was doing some job, and he was being paid for that job. So what he did is he hired one person to automate the whole working of his, and he was enjoying 1 year, and the machine was taking care of his work. It's there in the news. In fact, he has mentioned it up. So you can think of doing that, automate it up and let the other people do. So the machine's cost is actually factored in for that.
Yes, sir. I have one point to add here. So when we are able to add more value to the business and actually suggest them real value additions and cost savings, identify areas where they can have better business efficiencies, I'm sure actually managements are ready to pay. I have real cases where we have established that we can provide value addition and we have doubled our fees subsequent quarter or subsequent year. Amazing. So surely it depends on the value which we bring to the table also.
Perfect. That's great.
Yes.
And Mukesh Gupta is asking, like, for IT control, audit change management is also important. So I think some statement.
Okay, Deepika can answer this one. I think this is her area.
So IT control, audit change management, is it, sir?
Yeah. Audit change management is also important, like that he is telling.
Yeah, audit of change management is important. So generally audit rotation also happens. That is a separate thing on an audit perspective. But audit of change management is a very critical area, because otherwise we will not know what all has happened during the year. Right. So change management process is important. They have to maintain documentation for change management. As an auditor, I should evaluate all the changes that has happened during the year, so that whatever is material for my audit objectives, I have to take that and evaluate it in a very critical manner.
Okay.
Yes, I hope I.
So Mr. Nanda.
Sir, wherever you can add points, please give.
I agree with you, Deepika ma'am. I completely agree with you. What you said makes sense. And I was just trying to understand the question because you're right, because audit of change management is something which has to be looked into and is very important. And there are also audit change management that is part is also has to be looked into. But I completely agree with you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, sir.
And the next question is from Mr. Manda. How can we take comfort on data quality controls when upstream data has issues, particularly when companies are using legacy data capturing systems?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question because I'm working on a similar project right now. See, there are 2 points to that. Legacy systems, it doesn't mean that the quality of data may be not good. I have seen legacy systems where, in one of the cases where one of the energy company had one database which was used by 36 applications, where they were actually using it for Forex rates. All the Forex rates were in that database and 36 plus application were using it. It's a legacy database which was being used for a very long time. Now, it all depends on 2 things, which I say, that are we using our, environment clearly? So this was a case, I'll just tell you, where one of the organization wanted to do data science and all thing, and they approached us, but the whole thing was that they were not using the SAP environment itself properly. A lot of people say that this is a joke which goes in our SAP environment, that SAP is good, but Excel is the best. Everything will be taken out in Excel, and then all the analysis will be done in Excel, and try to do that. And it actually defeats the purpose, which is, why an ERP is all about there. So there are cases where then we have to go back and tell them, hey, you know what? Let's first clean up your system. First, let's have your thing. So data quality there becomes critical because, whatever the data you are talking about is not matching. It is something like trial balance not matching. That is the kind of environment which is happening because on one function, an MM function, you are telling me some data. On the FI, you are telling me some data, and both are not matching. So it doesn't make sense itself. So there is an issue on data quality, but it is nothing to do with legacy system. That is my submission out here, I would say.
Okay. So next question is from Mr. Anand Gupta. So dear Mr. Jangid, would you please have case studies around these success stories? So they would be super helpful if you can share like that.
I can share it up. You can drop me a mail. I'll share all the case studies on that exactly which are there. Sure.
Sure. So next question is from Mr. Rajat. What is the scope in this as a chartered accountant?
In which one? In ITGC or data science?
I think last session on this.
Okay, let's
so
ask.
Now they
first Deepika can answer, then I'll ask. Yeah, Deepika ma'am. And
Yes.
ITGC. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, sir. So ITGC is an integral part of audit. So if you ask me, it's like not a separate scope. It's like we have to upskill. Otherwise, there is someone else who's going to come into it. So there is no question of whether it is required or not. It is required. It is going to be part of our bread and butter. It's already in, let's say, SME 2 and above. Maybe in another couple of years, even MSME, Tally clients also, we have to do all these things. Maybe even with audit trail itself, without understanding backend, without understanding concept of database, change management or log monitoring, it's not going to work. So on an ITGC perspective, it's like a part of our bread and butter. So it's part of us.
Yes. I would say one thing. This is one of the things. So there is a kind of a saying, and this is actually from one of the boxer in the 1980s. Malcolm, I forgot his last name. He used to say one very interesting statement. It's very famous. Everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die. So that's the kind of situation which happens. There's a lot of scope out here. Okay, and there is a kind of a thing which happens. I just want to share with you. There was a time around 8 to 10 years back when IT was one of the emerging area, and we had ISACA, Bank India, and also our institute doing a lot of things. And very few chartered accountants tried to go into that deep area. And what happened? It's not that this area has not boomed. It has boomed, and we find a lot of engineers. Everyone is getting into this field and trying to do that, as Deepika rightly said. So if we don't do it, there are other people who will do it, because there is always a kind of gap. We can sit on our ivory tower, we say, it's all fine and everything, but there are a lot of demand which is there. If you want to understand more on that, just search for data scientists with business knowledge. I'm just trying to focus on data scientists with business knowledge. You see the kind of demand which is there in the organizations is huge. And
I can add one more point.
Yes,
actually, I'm myself also a data analyst, sir. I have
so you know that, ma'am.
Yes,
you know
sir.
that, right?
So here the key point is we can have a early movers advantage now.
Wow.
So into manufacturing, apart from the fintech companies and the technology-based companies, other companies are just in the process of implementing data science into their businesses.
Right.
So we are the people who have the business acumen also. And we can very easily learn technology also. It's not very complex. It's only the effort. It's the one step towards one direction. That's all. So if we do it now, that's the best thing where we have the early movers advantage. We have total business acumen. We have total knowledge about what is the expectation in each area. Let it be banking, let it be insurance, let it be some any industry, even manufacturing, let's say production line process, the efficiencies, prediction of defects. It can be even implementing of Kanban system in machine learning. It is going to be a game changer, actually.
Agree. Sure.
So next question is from Pratyusha. What are algorithm logs?
What are
algorithm logs?
So algorithm logs are basically how the algorithm is working. So whatever the algorithm has been working on, what basis it's working and all things, we just keep a kind of thing. Now there are two ways of looking at that. You can actually keep, there are algorithms which are written with a kind of process itself where I can actually see the logs. Fundamentals of the same thing is that how it has happened and why it has worked it out. So if in future, if you want to correct the algorithm, if there are some challenges and all things, I can actually go for it. That's what it is.
Next question is from Mr. Satish. Sir, how do you see when AC would like to see only few issues and would like to CAE to resolve and drop substantial number of issues in consultation within the management? In short, IA functions seen as a part of management. What will happen to audit independency in reporting?
That's a very good point. I think Satish Shinoy sir would have asked this question because it looks like his language. So that's something which we have to try to bring it up. The independence of IA function has to be always being there, but as a preferred advisor to business. So I remember in most of the organization where we have worked, in HR we used to have 360-degree evaluation for all other functions, but for IA function it used to be 180-degree evaluation, which means that our client will never give feedback to us, because if they start giving feedback to us, our whole independence will go into a toss. Now that is something which is very important, and as audit committees have been asking about, one of the key part which is there is audit committee also is trying to focus on the bigger issues, because they don't want to see on everything, but there are also kind of a strain on their attention span and everything. So as Satish sir asked, I think my sincere submission would be, we have to see that, okay, here is the complete picture. And just like we have executive summary, the dashboarding approach gives the executive summary that let's focus on these points which are there, not try to go or boil the ocean, try to focus on the main areas and everything and take that forward. And yes, independence has to be maintained, because we cannot be a part of the thing, because many of the times our audit governance concepts will all come from that. And that is something which is very important. That's my submission.
So next question is from Mr. Anshul. What would be the focus point in case of new system implemented?
Deepika, you would like to go for this new system?
Yes, sir.
Good.
So in case a new system is implemented in the organization, first important thing we have to see is how the migration has happened. So as an internal auditor, our primary focus will be how the data transfer happened, what are the controls and checks that has happened in the existing, from the existing system to the new system. So next important aspect which we have to do is the post-implementation review. That is how is the workflows are configured. So it can be more more control environment can be there from the existing system, but it cannot be less. So that comparison surely is required, whether all the controls which are existing in the old system is carried forward to the new system or not. And then we have to evaluate the additional controls. So be there on purpose including roles and responsibilities, delegation of powers, and input data validation. So this will be a key parameter. After that, we have to evaluate what the new system has to offer, whether we have utilized it to our full capacity. That is optimal utilization. Let's say from a 1 crore product, you have moved to a 3 crore product, but if you have not utilized and brought that value to the table, it is not worth it. So we have to evaluate and check whether all the best practices required and whatever can be explored from the new product is explored or not. So that will be our next key parameter. So I can actually keep telling so many areas in the new system implementation. It's a very, very huge chapter by itself. But on an audit perspective, these three, I think, will be more important areas.
I think very learning session, and especially young female speaker delivered excellent lectures. So many compliments, ma'am. All credits goes to all the speakers. So next question is from Mr. B. Satish Kumar. It would be good to shift resources between audit and functional management periodically so that the competency of the IA function can be scaled up.
I have a different view on this one. I would say, why to shift? Why can't we have management people come in audit function for some time? Shifting of resources and getting back will have, again, independence issues later point of time. But anyway, it's all depends from organization to organization. There are also now concept of Chinese wall and all thing. But I would say this is maybe a question which Shiva sir would have answered more better than me or Deepika. But it all depends. I would say it's an individual call.
Next question is from Asim. How do we strike a balance between AI or ML tools used by business functions and tools used by IA team for audit purpose?
Okay, that's a very good point. I would say the tools are not so important. It's all about how you are using the tools for. The IA's focus is completely different. IA's focus is more from a perspective of let's say risk management, anomaly detections, trying to see the bigger picture, all of that kind of things which is there. Business is more on the operational side. When business is using it, they are trying to see it, maybe it's a marketing analytics, trying to see where I can improve my sales. They are doing it from other perspective altogether. So the tools may be the same, but how we use it is simple, like Excel. Even the management functions will use, other team will be using Excel also. We are also using Excel, but our way of using Excel is different than the other people. So those things has to be something which we have to look into that. And yes, there are some, let's say, for example, I'll give you my favorite example is there. Python, R9, these are some of the normal things which we use across the thing. There are different versions or different, I would say, way it can be used by different functions. So it all depends on about the uses more than the tools which are there. So I would say tools are not so important. It's all about the functions or the strategy, how you're going to do that.
So next question is from Mr. Satish Chennai, sir. In say 10 years, do you think there will be only IT audit as internal audit? Like that?
No, sir, never, sir. I would say right now, we used to have earlier this concept of two things. We used to have a concept of, I remember around 8-10 years back, we used to have IT auditors, business auditors. This used to be the term which was used across the board. But now what is happening is, it is going to be, that is what we call it up. A lot of people have not heard about low code, no code platform. When I say low code, no code platform, they are platforms which are like, you don't require to have coding knowledge to do that. It is like drag and drop and you are able to just start using it for anyone. Any person with a very basic common knowledge of IT can start using it. And that is something very easy. So I see people, business functions, I think a lot of people who are CA here would have learned about executive information system in one of the paper which used to be there earlier called ISCA or, IT, executive information system, which is one system which you can use it as an executive, you can actually try to use it and work it at that. So there are going to be platforms which are already there, like NIME and other things, which basically make it very easy for any business function guy to do that. And I will see a more of hybrid auditors who are there, who are very good in technology and they are very good at business function. That is what is going to come out of that. You will become more of a hybrid auditor. My point.
Also added, it was Malcolm Tunako.
Oh, Malcolm Tanappa. Yes, that's a name. So I don't remember the last name. He said this. Everyone wants to, go to heaven, but no one wants to die for it, because he used to practice very hard. And people used to say, why you practice? He never lost any of the matches. So he used to say, I practice very hard because everyone wants to go to heaven, but no one wants to die for that, because we have to work hard for this. It's not going to be an easy transition for anyone to think of that. For me itself, when I moved into this one, it was not easy. I would say young people, it will be much easier for them to transition in this, but it is going to be challenging. But once we go into that, then we can see the benefit what it can bring to the table.
I'll add, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
More old people have transitioned than young people, sir.
Yeah, ma'am, but tough. It's always tough out there.
There are so many legends and veterans who are actually into IT now.
Yes.
But if we interview young chartered accountants to come into IT, they are like, no, I want to do tax, I want to do SA.
No, Paul
Experience matters.
Yeah, Paul sir is there. Paul sir has taught us so much of things. We have all learned from him, and he is amazing. All the people, Satish sir and all the things, we have learned from all of them, and we have been here today on that. Yeah.
So next question is from Asim. How do business auditors develop IT audit skills?
Okay, good point. So don't go for any of the courses which are being advertised on the web and all the thing. First thing, I would say I met one of my friend who is a CAE in Pune, and he told me something very interesting. So he wanted to actually use basically data analytics, and you won't believe what he did. That is an extreme, but I really like what he did. He just learned. He actually took a book on Python and one book on Power BI, and he developed some of the models himself. What he did, basically, I want to bring it out to you, is get his hands dirty. I don't expect you to basically go to that extreme of learning itself and all things, because everyone has their own way of. But my suggestion is, if business auditors want to go for it, they can start with baby steps. Learn something on these areas. There are a lot of material on YouTube and many of the channels on data science and everything, where they are talking about that. You can just go through it. Don't go for a courses or anything, and start getting your hands dirty. Do small projects in your organizations. Try to do some small projects. Work with your existing consultants who are there and all things. Do some small projects. You will learn faster, better, and all things. And don't think that your first project will be a big success. It is going to be. It's like learning cooking food. First time when I went abroad, I have to learn to cook my own food. It was dangerous initially, but I have to eat whatever I had, and now I can cook pretty decent. So that's the kind of thing. It takes some time. Deepika, you want to add something to that?
One point I'll add. So how I transitioned, I can share. So initially, nobody gave us any data analytics project or any IT project. So what initially we did was, I tried to do the existing projects which we had in a different way.
Yes.
So let's say already we are doing an internal audit. So this payroll audit, how we can approach it in a different way. There is an XML file. Okay, how to read the XML file.
Right.
So we can just start baby steps, like doing the existing work in a different way first. And automatically we will start reading for it. We'll start exploring. We'll be getting more knowledge. And by the time we'll have so much maturity that we'll be able to handle end-to-end automation assignments, end-to-end analytics assignments.
Very much. And just to add to what Deepika said, I would say if you want to do one thing, I will tell you one very interesting thing. Someone told me this and it worked for me. Whatever you are doing in Excel, try to do with the tool, maybe with Python or 9. Try to do the same thing with what you're doing in Excel. Try to do it with the tools. Initially, it will be very tough and all thing, but you will get your hands on very fast, and then you will try to explore, I can do this also, I can do that also. So for business auditors, it will be much easier to transition into this area.
So actually, I started doing in Power BI. So whatever I did in Excel, I did it in Power BI. Yeah. So now I came to a level where now I feel so uncomfortable to work in Excel.
That's true. That's
like, this pivot is not sufficient. I'm not able to slice it further. It's at this. So actually now I moved to a situation where working in Excel is difficult. I'm not able to get the shortcuts and all. Working in Power BI is simpler. So maybe the initial transition will be a little difficult, but once you get to get your hands dirty and get experience in that, you will be able to contribute a lot more in a very short period of time.
Yes, ma'am. Very much.
So next question is from Mr. Sridhar. Do you think new income tax software has followed what you're telling, sir?
It is to me or Deepika, because she's talking to ITGC.
No. Actually, can you repeat the question?
So the new income tax software.
Yes.
so has followed what you are telling. Like they're talking about, I think, new income tax website.
Okay. The controls in that that we have to audit and check what they have followed, not followed. So we, I'm not
Okay.
used it, so I don't know much to comment.
I would suggest this question is from.
So this question is from Sridhar.
Sridhar sir, you should put an RTI on this. I'm telling you. And there is something which is called, if I'm not wrong, there is something called software SQC, software quality control. Yeah, quality control team, which is there of Government of India and NIC, and most of this project are reviewed by them. So you can put an RTI. It would be good. I think it's a nice point. Huh? You should think of that.
No, actually, I think they're asking other way around. Like website has been developed. Like still there are so many bugs in the website.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
no, but I agree. But then also, I think there's a quality control and testing which is done. So an RTI should be done. It's a good thing.
Okay. So next question is from Mr. S. Padmanabhan. So how can you relate internal audit and systems audit? Both were discussed today, like that.
Yes, sir. How to relate means it's part of internal audit, sir. If you ask me, my team is working in all audits. They work with statutory audit team also, tax team also, GST team also, internal audit team also. So it's like part of audit. I think we cannot separate this thing distinctly. Yes, sir. You have something to say?
No, that's fine. I think what Padma sir is. My point would be there. Slowly, we have this concept is like, audits are going to be there, which are audits which are there. But how do we accelerate the whole audit procedures? So data science will become the part of your audit procedures. So any kind of things we can actually do it. So if we see our SA 200 series and all the thing, we talk about audit procedures, audit things and all things, and that can be easily linked from a perspective of how we use DA. So that is going to be there, because see, even our SA talks about using of data analytics, even our forensic accounting and investigation stand talks about using of data analytics. So it's actually a kind of common tools which are used across the board. That's what I would suggest.
Yes, absolutely.
So last question is from Mahesh. So is there any specific course module in AI and ML from audit perspective to learn, and suggest if any courses and the education provider like that?
I would suggest if you want to start with, with disclaimer, I am a big fan of 9. I have been using it for 5 years. So that's the reason I always tell people, because it's a low code, no code platform. So you can actually go to 9.org and they have all free courses which are there. Start using them. It will hardly take, it's an open source tool. It doesn't cost you even 1 rupee. Download on your machine and start using it. That would be the best thing which can do. And then try to see the problem statement which you are there. And we have a lot of discussion forum right now on audit analytics out there. You can actually put it up there and we can actually discuss more on that. No problems.
Yeah.
So I think only this many questions, sir. So it was indeed very knowledgeable session. So all the viewers enjoyed both the days. So the way they're sending the feedbacks and then asking the questions, and you people patiently answering the questions. So it really helped them a lot. So thank you so much on behalf of Bangalore branch.